Chapter 1075. Not just ruining your place, the Yin Emperor landed on the ground in a dignified manner. He waved his hand at his officials, indicating for them to rise. Then, he looked at Murong Zijuan, who was kneeling on the ground. His body trembled slightly as he frowned. With his powerful will, he could see that Murong Zijuan's spine was shattered and he was crippled. Who did this? The Yin Emperor lowered his head and asked. He didn't hide his anger, and his emperor's aura was terrifying. I'm sorry, father. I crushed the jade slip to summon you. I was useless. I had no other choice. Murong Zijuan raised his head with endless shame on his face. Although he didn't answer directly, he stared at Qin Hao's position with hatred. The Yin Emperor followed his gaze and guessed that Murong Zijuan's injury was caused by Qin Hao. He couldn't help but let out a cold snort and said, "Help your crown prince up. Leave the rest to me." Yes. The Northern Yin general helped Murong Zijuan up. At this moment, the Yin Emperor looked at Xiao Yi. His son Murong Zijuan's injury still had a chance to recover, but there were more important matters to deal with immediately. Murong Shi. Xiao Yi softly called out the Yin Emperor's name. With the arrival of the other party, he knew that things would be a little difficult. Could it be that you only saw Murong Shi and purposely ignored me, Xiao Yi? At this moment, a slightly lazy voice came from the void. In the next second after Murong Shi appeared, a handsome young man in his 20s walked out from the shattered space. He was wearing a white dragon robe and had a handsome face. As soon as he appeared, the entire Imperial Martial Plaza burst out with dazzling light. Below the young man was a jade throne. The top of the throne was inlaid with a 10,000-year-old pearl, which was dazzling. Behind the throne, there were two huge jade fans. Without anyone controlling them, they automatically fanned the breeze. The Qi Emperor didn't care that it was winter. He just sat there leisurely and enjoyed the cold wind blowing from the back of his head. It was as if the jade fans were blowing the wind of immortals. That wasn't all. In his left hand, there was a glazed pagoda. He was playing with two silver steel balls in his right palm. Even a fool could feel that these two silver steel balls contained monstrous power. Other than that, beneath Emperor Qi's feet, there was a pair of flying fire wheels that looked extremely crazy, fully displaying the name of the Emperor of Plentiful Treasures. "Greetings, Your Majesty." The Northern Qi officials hurriedly knelt. "Father, you've finally come. I had no choice but to crush the jade slip to summon you. I've disappointed you." Qi Yuan's injuries were far more severe than Murong Zijuan's. He didn't even have the strength to kneel as he spoke with tears in his eyes. Sensing the severity of Qi Yuan's injuries, Emperor Qi stretched out his hand and blew out two rays of light from two shining steel balls into Qi Yuan's body. Qi Yuan's complexion improved a lot, but he still needed someone to support him. The Murong family's 9 lions deity, Demon Blast. "I say, nephew Zijun, you really can do it." Emperor Qi glared at Murong Zijuan. Judging from his injuries, it was the crown prince of Northern Yin who did it. "Uncle Qi, I'm really sorry. Competition is dangerous to begin with. Moreover, I was also seriously injured by Qi Yuan. Most of my cultivation has dissipated. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't have ended up in such a miserable state," Murong Zijuan said in annoyance. It was all because of Qi Yuan that he lost to Qin Hao. "That's enough, Qi Fa. Now is not the time to pursue Jun Er's responsibility. Didn't you come here for Xiao Yi's girl?" Murong Shi pointed at Xiao Han and reminded the other party. Oh. I was a little anxious and didn't know what to do. Now we have to collude and put pressure on Xiao Yi." Emperor Qi sat on the impressive throne and replied with inappropriate words. His words were very funny, and it was easy for people to burst into laughter. But now, no one dared to laugh at Emperor Yuan. Everyone only felt fear in their hearts. The appearance of the two immediately disrupted the situation. Tian Daluo and Mansion Master Cui, who were disheartened and eager to take revenge, immediately reignited. Mansion Master Cui and Tian Daluo hurriedly held hands together and winked at each other, waiting to watch a wonderful show. "Murong Shi, Qi Fa, from what the two of you are saying, are you here to ruin my Xiao Yi's event?" Xiao Yi stared at the two with a sullen face. Duan Zhanfei's demonic beast armor and mask were already neatly put on. A suffocating tension spread in the air at this moment. The spectators and the common people had already quietly left the Imperial Martial Square, leaving open space after space. They didn't dare to show their faces in front of the 4 Emperor stage powerhouses. Xiao Yi, aren't your words too harsh? What do you mean by ruin your event? The two of us didn't want to be emperors and didn't want to deal with state affairs. Instead, we took the trouble to come here. Is it just to ruin your event? Sorry, this time, not only do we have to ruin your event, but we also want you to give us a satisfactory answer. You can choose. Either you marry your daughter to Murong Shi and become his daughter-in-law. Either you become my Emperor of Many Treasures, Imperial Concubine, and I will treat your daughter as my own. I won't mistreat her in the slightest. If not, Emperor Qi suddenly snorted. He clenched his right palm, and a raging wind spread out from the inside of the 2 silver steel pillars. For a moment, a gust of wind rose, causing the hundreds of thousands of Daliao's Imperial Guards to lose their balance. Chapter 1076. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The Saint Emperor was at his most glorious. Demonstration, arrogant and despotic demonstration. Barbaric was the most appropriate word to describe Emperor Duobao. Qi Fa, you are too arrogant. Duan Zhanfei shouted angrily and pressed his palm on the soles of his feet. Rumble. The earth quaked and the ground cracked under his palm. The cracks quickly spread to the feet of the Imperial Army, including the feet of Qin Hao and the others. The strange thing was, Duan Zhanfei's palm energy came out from the cracks and wrapped around everyone's legs. Their legs were like roots. No matter how strong the wind was, Qin Hao and the others were able to stabilize the mountain. Oh, I haven't seen you for a few years, and you have improved a lot. If you have time, let's spar. Emperor Qi dispersed the useless steel ball wind and smiled provocatively at Duan Zhanfei. Any time. Duan Zhanfei's demonic beast mask shot out 2 rays of sharp light, indicating that he was very angry. Enough! Xiao, he shouted. He took a deep breath and looked at Murong Shi and Qi Fa. What is this? A threat? Coercion? Or are you saying that you're on the same side and declaring war? Xiao Yi, don't be too agitated. A war between the 3 kingdoms is the worst plan. Since Qi Fa has stated his purpose so crudely, I won't hide it. To put it simply, your daughter can only marry either Northern Qi or Northern Yin to participate in the competition that you organized. My junior is so badly injured that he is almost crippled. Your daughter will have to pay the price for the rest of her life to take care of him. If not, Murong Shi, will be the first to disagree if someone else becomes Daliao's son-in-law. Emperor Yin expressed his attitude. His tone was firm and filled with absolute conviction. Qi Yuan and Murong Zijuan laughed at the same time. Their laughter seemed to be mocking Qin Hao's incompetence. Ha ha, this is wonderful. You've worked so hard to defeat everyone and become the champion, but you still can't marry the princess. You, Qin Hao, are really sad. Tian Dayuo jumped down from the building with his walking stick. Murong Shi, I didn't expect that you and Qi Fa would work together so closely. You've openly turned against Xiao Yi. You've truly opened my eyes. Palace Chief Chui had his hands behind his back as he lightly floated in front of the two with a smile. His body stood with the Yin Emperor, as though he had joined their camp. Who do you think you are? Do you think you have the qualifications to sit on the same level as me? Scram! Murong Shi rolled up his sleeves, and a strong gale directly blew away Mansion Head Chui. Although the Zhanyue sect was located in the northern Yin, it was not as obedient as the Medicine Emperor Pavilion in the northern Qi Kingdom. It often caused trouble and specifically picked on the faults of the Murong royal family, as if it wanted to replace them. Murong Shi did not have a single shred of good impression towards Manor Head Chui. Manor Head Chui was infuriated when he heard Murong Shi call him a dog, but he really couldn't do anything to him. Without the support of the Zhanyue sect's palace chief, Murong, she could kill Manor Head Shui with a flick of his finger. Manor Head Shui sneered, nodded, and stood behind Murong, Shi, and Chi Fa in a comical manner. What do you think? Xiao Yi, be straightforward and give me an answer. In short, you can choose between me and Murong Shi's family. As for this Western Yang Qin Hao, he's just like an ant, like a clown. He has no right to stand in front of us and say anything. I don't have much time. Don't push me too far. After all, I'm under the pressure of the Medicine Emperor Pavilion. Once that old bastard, the Holy Emperor, comes out of seclusion and knows that his two descendants have died tragically, you know very well what kind of crazy and terrifying impulses he will do. Half of the northern Qi kingdom will be destroyed. Emperor Qi's tone was quite heavy. His strong attitude was actually due to the pressure of the Medicine Emperor Pavilion. After all, Jiang Fengyu and Jiang Zizai were the only two descendants of the Holy Emperor. Therefore, Emperor Qi was in a difficult position. Only if you marry your daughter to one of us will we help you stop that old bastard, the Holy Emperor. Xiao Yi, this is the last chance we're giving you. If you continue to act willfully, then not only will your Xiao clan die, the entire Great Liao will be razed to the ground by the hallowed grounds. Of course, if you have the confidence to stop him, then treat my words as nonsense. Murong, she sneered. After all, the Holy Emperor of the Medicine Emperor Pavilion was the oldest and most terrifying Emperor Realm Master in the entire Northern Qi Kingdom. His cultivation was so strong that it made people's hair stand on end. It was said that 600 years ago, when Dindi, who was worshipped by the continent's alchemists, was still alive, the Holy Emperor, who was also an alchemist, expressed his dissatisfaction. When the Holy Emperor was at his peak, he mustered up the courage to challenge Dindi. In the end, he was defeated by Dindi in 10 moves. Although the Holy Emperor was at his peak, he could only block 10 moves from Dindi. However, those 10 moves were already the most glorious battle record in the entire continent. If it were any other Emperor Realm Master, they would definitely die under Dindi's sword or arrow within 3 moves. You've been thinking for so long, are you stupid? I'm not here to ruin your show, but to save your life. Xiao Yi, don't be ungrateful. Emperor Qi was a little impatient and anxiously shouted. This shout also woke up Xiao Yi, who was in deep thought. Blue veins popped out on his fists as he clenched them together. That's right, the Holy Emperor was the #1 great emperor in the Northern Qi Kingdom. In the past, he had fought with Dindi for 10 rounds. At that time, the Holy Emperor's cultivation had already reached the peak of the 8th stage of the Emperor Yuan realm. 600 years had passed. It was very likely that he would break through the shackles and advance to the highest level of the 9-star Emperor Yuan realm. 9-star Emperor realm. This was the realm that all emperors dreamed of and feared the most. Apart from the Battle of the Arch who held the Sunset Divine Bow, there was basically no one in the continent who could defeat the 9-star Emperor Yuan realm. Father, I, Xiao Han, will only marry Big Brother Qin Hao in this life. Even if I die, I want to be with him. Seeing Xiao Yi's hesitation, Xiao Han also expressed her attitude. Chapter 1077. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations Weiwei appears die. Your life and death are not up to you to decide. Emperor Qi coldly shouted at Xiao Han. He meant that if he wanted Xiao Han to die, Xiao Han would have no way to live. If he didn't want Xiao Han to die, Xiao Han wouldn't even be able to die. Try it if you have the guts. Even the Holy Emperor wouldn't dare to behave so atrociously in front of me. Qin Hao furrowed his brows and pulled Xiao Han's hand tightly as he stood in front of her. He had been wondering why he felt that the Holy Emperor's title was a little familiar. It seemed to have crossed paths with him before, because 600 years ago, Qin Hao also knew a guy called the Holy Emperor. After listening to Qi Fa and Murong Shi's explanation, Qin Hao finally realized that this Holy Emperor was Jiang Taihe, who had been beaten by him until he cried for his parents and knelt at the foot of Sunset Peak for an entire year. The real situation at that time was not that Jiang Taihe had withstood 10 moves, but that Qin Hao had scared him out of his wits with just 2 moves. Qin Hao didn't kill him because he was also an alchemist and it wasn't easy for him to cultivate. Later on, Jiang Tao humbly asked for guidance and knelt at the foot of Sunset Peak, begging Qin Hao for guidance, of course. Only Jiang Taihe and Qin Hao knew about these obscure things. So even if Jiang Taihe came personally, he couldn't do anything to Qin Hao. It was very likely that he would be scared back. Qin Hao didn't lie. When these arrogant words fell into Qi Fei's ears, he didn't think much of it. He pointed at Qin Hao and mocked. "You ignorant brat. You don't even know the power of a 9-star great emperor. It seems that Xiao Yi's son-in-law isn't much. You're just a short-sighted person, a frog at the bottom of a well." Bullsh asterisk T. I don't want to waste my breath on you. Anyway, no one can touch Xiao Han in front of me and force her to do something she doesn't want to do. Qin Hao's attitude was unusually firm. You're just an insignificant ant. How dare you rebel against the heavens? Fine, I'll send you to the Western Paradise with a single palm strike. This is the best way to deal with this. Qi Fei was infuriated by Qin Hao's rebuttal twice. He glared at Qin Hao fiercely and was about to launch an attack with his monarch-level intent. But this time, a loud laugh shook the sky, and a majestic demonic aura spread out from Xiao Yi's body. A pair of huge wings as black as ink spread out from his back. They were more than 20 meters long and covered the sun above his head. With that, Xiao Yi slowly rose into the air. His eyes burned with battle intent and fury as he hoarsely said, "I really am not as bold as my son-in-law. I was almost scared off by a saint emperor. If I, Xiao Yi, can't even protect my own daughter and son-in-law, what's the use of having a monarch-level cultivation? Come, Murong Shi and Qi Fei. Since you want to cause trouble, I'll do as you wish. Xiao Yi, you're really stubborn. You're simply courting death." Qi Fei immediately abandoned Qin Hao and also rose into the air. "Congratulations, Xiao Yi. You've made the stupidest choice in your life. Choosing Qin Hao is your biggest mistake." Emperor Yan's face was cold. His purple gold dragon robe rose into the air and pulled to the same height as Xiao Yi. At this moment, there was no need for words. Battle King Duan Zhanfei silently rose into the air and resolutely fought side by side with Xiao Yi. For monarch-level powers intertwined, setting off terrifying waves. A great battle was about to break out. In terms of cultivation, Xiao Yi's side was undoubtedly at an absolute disadvantage. After all, Emperor Yan's cultivation was much higher than his. Secondly, Duan Zhanfei was a newly advanced monarch. 1-star Emperor Yuan was the weakest existence among all emperors. Even if he could kill emperor-level cultivators like ants, once he was caught in a battle at the level of Emperor Yuan, he basically couldn't help Xiao Yi much. Moreover, Qi Fei was known as the great emperor of many treasures. He wasn't someone to be trifled with. But at this moment, the four of them were just coldly confronting each other. Their wills were competing with each other, and no one really made a move. Once Emperor Yuan made a move, the mountains would collapse and the earth would crack. Space would become chaotic. It was enough to destroy the entire Daliao imperial city. Xiao Yi wouldn't ignore the life and death of the people in the city. Murong Shi and Qi Fei also didn't dare to force Xiao Yi into a frenzied state. Once they forced Xiao Yi into a corner, even if they won in the end, they would suffer an indelible injury. That was a price that Murong Shi and Qi Fei weren't willing to bear. Therefore, the four of them fell into a stalemate. They were restrained by each other, and no one dared to act rashly. They didn't dare to move, but it didn't mean that others wouldn't. Mansion Master Cui and Tian Daluo, who hated Qin Hao to the bone, saw this. Great, their chance had come. Without hesitation, the two of them ruthlessly attacked at the same time. Mansion Master Cui believed that apart from Xiao Yi's group of four, he was currently the strongest person in the entire Imperial Martial Plaza. At this moment, he was the sky, he was the earth, he was the great ruler who could summon the wind and rain. If he didn't kill Qin Hao, when would he? Little bastard, pay with your life for my disciple. I will tear you into pieces. Mansion Master Cui had a ferocious look on his face. If you still don't die this time, I, Tian Daluo, will also swallow a mouthful of shit. Let me end you with my own hands. Swish! The two of them attacked at the same time. They tore through space together and directly descended on Qin Hao's head. This dangerous scene caught everyone off guard, causing Murong Shi and Qi Fa to be dumbfounded as they watched. Big brother Qin Hao, be careful. The scene from back then repeated itself. At the moment of life and death, Xiao Han didn't hesitate to use her back to shield Qin Hao from the wind and rain, blocking the killing blow from the two primitive emperors. After Xiao Yi saw this, his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. It was as if he saw the scene of his wife risking her life for him. He howled, and the oppressive power of the emperor's stage finally erupted. However, this power that swept out was immediately restrained by Murong Shi and Qi Fa. They even suppressed Xiao Yi. The two of them looked in Qin Hao's direction and sneered. They had to admit that Mansion Master Chui had done a good job. This person usually looked quite foolish, but at the crucial moment, he actually did the smartest and most satisfying thing. However, what Murong Shi and Qi Fa didn't expect was that Mansion Master Chui and Tian Daluo's seemingly powerful and sure-kill attack. However, it was intercepted by an unbelievably fast figure with a terrifying aura. This was a beautiful figure that appeared from Qin Hao's interspatial ring. When Xiao Han was about to sacrifice herself, Qin Hao's interspatial ring produced a strong fluctuation. Within the fluctuation, a woman wearing a robe flew out like a beam of light and appeared in front of Tian Daluo. At the same time, a powerful palm force ruthlessly pressed down on Tian Daluo's head. It seems that I've let you jump around for too long, so much so that you've forgotten who you are. Mu Yue's beautiful eyes were filled with anger, and her 5 fingers clenched tightly on Tian Daluo's head. It's you. When Tian Daluo saw this woman, he was instantly scared out of his wits. Of course, he remembered Vivian. It was Vivian's appearance that caused him to fail in his act of pretentiousness. His efforts in Star Moon Academy were in vain, and he had to flee in panic. Tian Daluo still remembered the terrifying scene of him being severely injured by Mu Yue's 2 swords. My life is over. Tian Daluo howled miserably. Along with this, bang, his head turned into meat paste under Vivian's palm. This attack had destroyed his divine soul, and his headless body fell to the ground. F***CK. Mansion Master Chui cursed inwardly as he ran in the opposite direction. He didn't know who Vivian was. However, he saw that Vivian's body was suffused with platinum energy. Although it wasn't very strong, it was a sign that Vivian was an Emperor Realm expert. Run? Do you think you can run? Purple Phoenix Ultimate Dance of Judgment. Chapter 1078. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Overestimating oneself. This sword made a sharp sound, but no one could see the sword light, because it was too fast and too powerful. Until Mansion Master Chui flew far away and became a small black dot in the sky that was about to disappear. Everyone saw a blazing white sword light piercing through the sky and overlapping with Mansion Master Chui, who had become a small black dot. Above the void, a thunderous sound reverberated as a radiant phoenix soared into the sky. As the phoenix flew past, Mansion Master Chui exploded into a black residue, and his aura completely disappeared between heaven and earth. You've done too many bad things. Even your death is so ugly. You're really polluting the earth and the environment. Vivian scolded. With a wave of her hand, the sword disappeared. However, everyone in the Imperial Marshal Square, including Yuan Yuan and Dan Xian, stared at the remains of Mansion Master Chui with their eyes wide open. Their jaws were almost dislocated, and they fell into collective shock. This silence and shock lasted for a long time in the square, and no one broke it. Did you see it clearly? This is the power of the Purple Phoenix dance. You still need to strengthen it. After easily killing an 8th-stage Origin Emperor, Vivian turned around and said to Xiao Han, as early as half a month ago, Vivian woke up from the state of fusing with the light of judgment and successfully refined the light of judgment into her origin spirit. She didn't appear because she was afraid that her accidental appearance would disturb Qin Hao and Xiao Han. At this time, she looked at Xiao Han with a smile. Vivian admired the girl standing in front of her very much. Her appearance, aptitude, and character were all very pleasing to her. I understand. I will practice very seriously again. Xiao Han swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Her eyes were still full of shock as she responded to Vivian with a stuttering voice. When she used the purple phoenix dance, Vivian had already seen it. Vivian wasn't wrong. Xiao Han's purple phoenix dance lacked courage, charm, and power. Compared to Vivian, who was a real empress, they were two different concepts. This required Xiao Han to slowly comprehend it and slowly grow. Looking at the two girls who were asking and answering questions, Qin Hao shook his head and sighed. Were Vivian and Xiao Han born in the same family in his previous life? Why didn't they feel like strangers at all? Emperor Yuan? At this moment, Murong Shi and Qi Fa finally regained their senses. The two of them immediately became nervous and landed on the ground. Even a fool could tell that the empress who killed Tian Daluo and Chief Chui was closely related to Qin Hao. Thank you for your help, Mississippi Han, you scared your father. How is it? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Xiao Yi flew over together with Duan Zhanfei and immediately checked whether Xiao Han was injured or not. Xiao Han shook his head. Haha, what a surprise. Another meddlesome person has appeared out of nowhere, and as soon as he showed up, he killed the mansion master and grand elder of the beheading moon mansion. Even I don't have the guts to do such a thing. Should I praise your courage, or should I feel sorry for Xiao Yi? Qi Fa was indeed surprised by Vivian's appearance. After the shock, he started to gloat. A Saint Emperor from Medicine Emperor Pavilion was enough to consign Xiao Yi to eternal damnation. Now, it was even better. The mansion master and grand elder of the beheading moon mansion died at the same time. Vivian's action could be said to have destroyed the entire sect of the beheading moon mansion. As the old ancestor of the beheading moon mansion and the most powerful backer behind the scenes, once the Supreme Emperor came out of seclusion, Xiao Yi would face a monstrous disaster. At this time, looking at the elders and disciples of the beheading moon mansion kneeling on the ground, hugging each other and sobbing, Qi Fa shook his head. What the Supreme Emperor will do is a matter for the future. Right now, I just want to ask you, unknown friend, are you planning to ruin the good thing between me and Qi Fa? Murong, she stared at Vivian coldly. He was more concerned about what Vivian would do next. Of course, if Vivian wanted to support Qin Hao, even if the difficulty of killing a first-stage Supreme Emperor increased by a little, it was not enough to make Murong she feel troubled. Oh, sorry to disturb you. In fact, not only do we want to ruin your good thing, but I also want to ride on your head and shit. Without waiting for Vivian to speak, Yilong Yuan had already stood up. He was still wearing his nightgown, and he walked to Murong Shi with a sneaky face. Who do you think you are? Murong Shi frowned. He vaguely felt that the bare-chested, middle-aged man in front of him, who made people want to strangle him to death, was a little familiar, as if he had seen him before, but he couldn't remember. Who do I think I am? Go back and ask your imperial concubine Hua. Who do I think I am? Yilong Yuan was very angry at Murong Shi's forgetfulness. With a loud shout, the nightgown on his body turned into pieces that filled the sky. Hundreds of thousands of young girls covered their eyes and screamed desperately. A majestic golden dragon robe was crowned on Yilong Yuan's body, and a three-pronged Poseidon halberd appeared in his palm. At this moment, the torrential water soul power lingered around Yilong Yuan's body, and a drizzle began to fall from the sky. When he saw Yilong Yuan's outfit, the blurry memories of the past became clearer and clearer. He couldn't help but explode. He was so angry that he rushed forward and wanted to tear Yilong Yuan's face apart. It's you, Yilong Yuan, who seduced my concubine. F***CK your father, I'll kill you. Once, Yilong Yuan secretly went to the northern border to play and made him wear a green hat. However, the concubine who was seduced was Murong Shi's most beloved concubine. He had always been reluctant to kill her, so it was his shame and pain until now. Murong Shi, calm down. Qi Fa moved the throne and hurriedly blocked in front of Murongshi. Xiaohan's matter hadn't been resolved yet, so he couldn't waste his energy on a piece of dogskin plaster. Chi Fa more or less knew Yilong Yuan's character and trump cards. In short, this person couldn't be killed, but he couldn't be provoked. It wasn't that they couldn't afford to offend him, but that they would also get into trouble. Yilong Yuan, F***CK your father. You still dare to come to the northern border. This time, I'll definitely take your dog life. Murongshi was still extremely angry after being stopped by Chi Fa. Hee F***CK you. Anyway, my father is dead, so I'll go and mess with you. Yilong Yuan winked and acted like a scoundrel to the extreme. Murongshi was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. At this moment, a few middle-aged men with extraordinary bearings walked over from the leather seat area. As they walked, several different styles of dragon robes were worn on their bodies. Yilong Yuan is right. In fact, we don't just want to ruin your good deed. I also want to overestimate myself and pee on Emperor Qi's head. The person who spoke was an old acquaintance of Qin Hao, Emperor Wei of Western Liang, Nalin Li, and Naransu's father, Nalin Zhenggang. And me, please allow me to overestimate myself. Qin Hao didn't recognize the person standing on Nalin Zhenggang's left. However, it wasn't difficult to guess that he should be Emperor Zhao of Western Liang Great Zhao. And me, I also want to overestimate myself. A middle-aged man in a black dragon robe spoke. He looked extremely solemn and dignified. Emperor Bu Xiangqin's father from Western Liang Tianlong Kingdom. At the same time, Bu Xiangqin, who had been staying in the crowd, also stood out with a laugh and came at Xiaogua's line. Nalin Zhenggang of Western Liang, Emperor Zhao of Western Liang, and the people from the Bu family. At this moment, Murongshi and Chi Fa's expressions were no longer as relaxed as before. Instead, there was a hint of seriousness. And me, please let me be like them. I also want to be crazy and overestimate myself. Astonished, a little old man stood at the feet of the mighty Emperor Yin. However, the old man's aura was too weak, like an ant, so he didn't attract Murongshi's attention. Who the F***CK are you? Murongshi lowered his head and looked at the old man. I'm the ancestor of the Qin family. You can call me Daddy Qin Shilong. The ancestor of the Qin family, Qin Shilong, looked up at Murongshi. He was so angry that his cheeks were puffed up. This person dared to bully his grandson. As a grandfather, he must avenge his grandson. Ha ha ha. Please allow me to overestimate myself and laugh wildly for an hour. Chapter 1079. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Demonic Beasts attack Murongshi and Chi Fa's faces twisted. The royal families of the four empires of Western Liang had all come out to support Qin Hao and prevent them from ruining the wedding. However, Murongshi and the others were not afraid at all. After all, strength was the key to everything. Instead of staying in Western Liang, all of you came to behave atrociously in front of me. Moreover, you even shamelessly ruined our plans. What a bunch of incompetent, motley crew. Chi Fa was so angry that he laughed. A terrifying primordial chi mixed with anger condensed in his palm. Not only the four royal families, but also me. Dan Xian waved his sleeves, and his beard fluttered. He flew over and stood in a row with Yilong Yuan. And me, and me, and me. The Dean of Starmoon College, Shun Tianfeng. The Dean of Chiang University, Xin Qiue, and the Vice Dean, Yao Lao. The Blood Emperor Rebirth, the Old Demon. He led a large number of Western Liang's top forces. From the monarchs and Yuan venerables to the emperors, there were tens of thousands of them. The scale was vast. Perhaps in the eyes of Murongshi and Chi Fa, they were too weak or overestimating themselves. But they represented Western Liang, that barren, ancient land that was almost ignored by everyone. Western Liang might be weak, but the martial artists of Western Liang were united and firm in their beliefs. They would never be disloyal to outsiders. In front of Chi Fa and Murongshi, Yilong Yuan, Nalan Zhenggang, Emperor Zhao, and Emperor Bu bit their fingers and threw their sacred blood into the air. The Yi clan of Luo Shui is willing to form an alliance with Xiao Wudi. The Nalan clan of Western Wei is willing to form an alliance with Xiao Wudi. The Zhao clan of Western Liang is willing to form an alliance with Xiao Wudi. The Bu clan of Sky Dragon is willing to form an alliance with Xiao Wudi. From now on, we are as close as lips and teeth. Fortune and misfortune coexist. We will never betray each other. Those who disobey will be destroyed by the heavens. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 4 drops of blood condensed into a ball and floated in the air, emitting sacred light. In the name of Mr. Qin, the martial artists of Western Liang are willing to form an alliance with Xiao Wudi. Tens of thousands of Yuan monarchs and Yuan venerates followed the lead of a few Yuan sovereigns and Yuan venerates as they threw out their essence blood. The blood essences of these 10,000 people gathered with Yilong Yuan and the others, emitting a radiance that was even brighter and hotter than the sun, causing Xiao Yi's blood to boil to the extreme. He boldly shouted, "Thank you for your love. I, Xiao Yi, am endlessly grateful." After saying that, a wisp of Emperor Yuan's blood essence was flicked out by Xiao Yi's finger and fused with the huge floating mass of blood. Accompanied by the solemn and ancient chant of the crowd, this huge ball of blood turned into a ray of light and rose into the sky at an incredible speed. Then, the sound of thunder reverberated throughout the world and swept across the 4 seas. The heavenly pact was completed. You bunch of ants really don't know what's good for you. How dare you meddle in Daliao's affairs? Do you really think that if the grasshoppers unite, they can defeat the giant elephant? Good, good, good. I'll let you experience the power of death. Tremble before me. Chi Fa was about to go crazy. Everyone was undoubtedly provoking his emperor's might and slapping his face. He let out a hoarse scream. He wanted to start a massacre and make this place turn into a river of blood. Suddenly, just as he was about to make his move, Chi Fa suddenly saw a huge layer of dark clouds flying over from the distant sky. The dark clouds spanned thousands of meters and stretched endlessly. They were like thousands of soldiers and horses that could topple mountains and overturn seas. The ancient and wild aura of demonic beasts caused the world to tremble. Daliao's imperial army immediately fell into extreme panic, and shouts rose and fell one after another. Demonic beast attack, prepare for battle, prepare for battle. Oh my God, why are there so many demonic beasts? And all of them are high-level demonic beasts. Why are they coming for our imperial city? Why didn't the Border Legion send out any signal? At this moment, the entire imperial city panicked. The power of demonic beasts had surpassed that of humans since ancient times. Even cultivators of the same level rarely defeated demonic beasts of the same level in a one-on-one situation. Take Duan Ziju's cloud-piercing flame rock as an example. If there were no 3 to 4 human sages working together, it could destroy a city in an instant and kill the people in the city. There was more than one demonic beast flying over. There were at least 50 to 60,000 of them. The level of each demonic beast was not inferior to the cloud-piercing flame rock and Gongsun Chongqing's blood demon tiger. The 4 beasts that led the way even emitted the terrifying aura of high-level beast emperors. Although Xiao Yi and the warlord were present in the city, ordinary soldiers were no match for these demonic beasts. Faced with such a shocking lineup, Chi Fa and Murong Shi's heartbeat quickened, and a smile appeared on their faces. Looks like I don't have to do anything. Daliao is done for, Chi Fa said with his hands behind his back. Once the demonic beast army descended into the imperial city, no one would survive except for Xiao Yi and Duan Zhanfei. Xiao Yi was really unlucky. Not only did he offend the Holy Emperor and the Mansion Emperor, but he also attracted tens of thousands of high-level demonic beasts. Chi Fa saw that other than the 4 beast emperors that led the way, there were many ancient beasts with extinct bloodlines in the demonic beast army. Those ancient beasts were relatively powerful. However, the more Qin Hao looked at them, the more he felt that something was amiss. The magical beast army seemed to be charging at them menacingly, but they didn't seem to have any hostility. It was only when he noticed that there was a giant flying hound following behind the four beast emperors that Qin Hao's nervousness turned into joy. He raised his hand and shouted, "Stop! Everyone stop! They are looking for me! They are looking for me!" What? How is this possible? They are here for the prince consort? Chapter 1080. Translator. Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo Studio competing for backing? In the next moment, Qin Hao used his actions to prove that he was not lying. As the magical beast army finally flew to the sky above the Imperial Marshal Square, the people were so frightened that they closed their eyes and screamed. The four high-level beast emperors leading the group turned into four kind-looking middle-aged men. They landed lightly in front of Qin Hao and bowed deeply. This scene shocked Murong Zijuan and Qi Yuan so much that their eyeballs almost popped out. The Beast Emperor asked us to send our young master to our benefactor, one of the Beast Emperors in green said emotionally. Then, the four of them moved aside. It was 5 meters tall, and its body was 10 feet long. It looked like a dog spirit that had transformed into a giant dog that could devour the sky. It walked valiantly and nobly as it walked past Qi Fei and Murong Shi. Along the way, it completely ignored the two of them as it walked in front of Qin Hao. After arriving, the dog spirit immediately returned to its original state. Its nobility and elegance were gone. It directly crawled under Qin Hao's feet and stuck out its tongue to lick Qin Hao's palm. It was so excited and happy, just like a puppy that had run away from home for many years and saw its owner. What the F***CK this is? Qi Fa pointed at the scene in front of him and was stunned speechless. Why is there a fluctuation of energy on this giant dog that makes my heart palpitate? Murong Shi looked on helplessly. Even though the dog spirit did not attack him, it made his heart beat faster and faster, and the pressure became stronger and stronger. Not only him, but Qi Fa also felt it, and the appearance of another person appeared in their minds at the same time. It was an old man with white hair and a white beard. He looked like he did not have much time left. However, his strength was far above that of Emperor Yin and Emperor Qi. They still could not forget that the old man came to the north alone and repelled the combined attack of Qi Fa and Murong, Shi's father, with one palm. And that old man's beast form was exactly the same as the giant dog in front of them. The 1,000-year beast emperor of the Medicine Valley. Murong Shi finally remembered the scene from his childhood. Cold sweat flowed down his forehead nervously. "Go away, are you blind? Don't block my way." Just as Murong Shi was in a daze, a tyrannical shoulder suddenly collided with him from behind. This collision caused the Yin Emperor Murong Shi to stagger. He could not even stand on his heels and retreated a few steps, almost losing face and squatting on the ground. Murong Shi raised his head in anger and saw the person who bumped into him walk past Qi Fa. It was an ordinary-looking middle-aged man. He casually snapped his fingers in front of Qi Fa. Bang! The two flying fire wheels that carried Qi Fa's throne cracked at the same time. Following Yin Laobei's finger, Qin Hao saw the daughter of the Formation Guild's guildmaster, Luoluo Fongda, walking towards him with a smile on her face. Boom! Murong Shi's mind shook. Oh no! Chapter 1081. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation want to leave? Difficult. Face Like Cream called out to Qin Hao in such a friendly manner. The two of them must be old acquaintances. In other words, Yin Laobei and Qin Hao were close friends. Qi Fa and Murong Shi wanted to retreat. Yin Laobei's array skills were at the peak of perfection, and his cultivation was even more terrifying. Even if they worked together with Xiao, Yi, and Duan Zhanfei, they might not be able to hurt Yin Laobei. With Yin Laobei around, it would be hard for them to touch Qin Hao. Lady like Frost, why are you here? Looking at Yin Rushuang in front of him, Qin Hao was both surprised and delighted. What do you mean, why am I here? I've been watching the competition in the crowd. I just didn't say hi to you. Face like cream said with a smile. She stood beside Yin Laobei and held onto his arm. The father and daughter stood side by side. Whether it was their facial features or their gestures, they were very similar. Qin Hao finally realized. He pointed at Yin Laobei and said, "Could it be that this very strong uncle is your—" "Yes, my father is the leader of the Array Guild and the #1 Array Emperor in the northern borderline. I even think that no one in the world is better at arrays than my father." Ha ha ha. Face like cream laughed loudly. It's just a false reputation. The title of #1 in arrays is just a compliment from the younger generation. In reality, I'm just a fan of arrays. Even though there's always someone better than you, in the northern borderline, if I, Yin Laobei, claim to be #2 in arrays, no one would dare to claim to be #1. Array Emperor Yin raised his head and laughed. He was showing off to his heart's content. Chi Fa and Murong Shi's mouths twitched. Their hearts were filled with jealousy. Yin Laobei was really shameless. Even Xiao Yi rolled his eyes. Hearing about you is not as good as meeting you in person. Miss Rushuang often talks about you, and I've been dreaming about you for a long time. Today, I'm really lucky to be able to meet you. As an honorary elder of the guild, I didn't report to the guild even once. I'm really ashamed. It's my fault. Qin Hao shook his head and clasped his fist towards Yin Laobei with a guilty expression. It was as if not going to the Array Guild was his biggest regret and loss. It was even more painful than losing 500 million. However, the honorary elder title was something that Face Like Cream purposely put on Qin Hao in order to intimidate Simon Laoqing, the governor of Western Fair City. Later on, Yin Rushuang took the matter seriously and repeatedly brought it up to Qin Hao, asking him to join the Array Guild. However, Qin Hao was used to being idle and did not give her an accurate response. Furthermore, Qin Hao did not want to join the Array Guild at all. Seeing Qin Hao's humble and self-reproachful attitude, Yin Laobei laughed in his heart. How could he not see that Qin Hao did not want to be an elder of the Array Guild at all? Even the words that he said to flatter himself were probably just an act. If he really wanted to join the Array Guild, he would have come a long time ago. Even 100,000 mountains would not be able to stop him. When it came to acting, Qin Hao was the real actor. Qin Hao was the real movie king. After all, Qin Hao's acting skills in the hallway of Xiao Yi's backyard were deeply engraved in Yin Laobei's heart. However, Yin Laobei did not expose him. Instead, he held Qin Hao's hand and chatted with him passionately. The old man and the young man talked and laughed. They treated everyone else as if they were nothing. They even reached a state of selflessness. They only had each other in their eyes. This made the martial artists outside envious. Look, this is an unprecedented friendship despite the difference in age. If Array Emperor Yin can hold my hand and teach me so affectionately, I wouldn't be reincarnated in vain, even if I were to die 10,000 times. Also, look at Miss Rushuang's eyes. She keeps looking at Qin Hao. She must be interested in Qin Hao. I'm so jealous. It was not only the martial artists outside. Xiaogua, Yi Shuihan, and the others were also envious. Big Brother is so awesome. He actually knows the Emperor Stage expert in the Array Guild. There are many Emperor Stage experts, but there are not many famous Array Emperors in the entire mainland. Yi Shuihan exclaimed in shock. As expected of Little Nine's idol, I'm willing to sacrifice my life for my idol. No one can stop me. I want to sing a song. Little Nine beat his chest excitedly. Even the old demon could not sit still. He moved his face in front of Yin Laobei and said sincerely, "Fellow Taoist, I've been fascinated by the Array Guild for a long time. I don't know when I'll have the honor of learning from you." The old demon's head suddenly popped out, startling Yin Laobei. He stopped talking with Qin Hao. Cough, cough. So Qin Hao is an elder under Senior Yin. I'm sorry for the disrespect. Since that's the case, we won't disturb you any longer. I still have matters to attend to in the state of Qi. I'll take my leave now. Chi Fa hurriedly said and turned to leave. Murong Shi was not slow either. He quickly said, "Today, I'm just informing Xiao Yi of the impending danger out of goodwill. I told him to be wary of Saint Emperor Xian. Since I've delivered the message, I should leave as well. In fact, I still have many matters to attend to. Father, why did you suddenly admit defeat? You haven't killed Qin Hao yet. You haven't helped me vent my anger. How can you leave without doing anything? Hurry up and tear Qin Hao into pieces so that I can be Daliao's son-in-law. Murong Zijuan grabbed Murong Shi's arm tightly. His face was filled with unwillingness and anger. Bastard! Slap! Murong Shi slapped Murong Zijuan's face. Murong Zijuan's eyes rolled back and he fainted. At this moment, Qi Fa secretly glanced at Qi Yuan. Qi Yuan trembled violently and quickly nodded. His eyes seemed to say, "Father, don't say anything. I understand everything. Did I allow you to leave in such a hurry?" Chapter 1082. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation 10th Grade. Forbidden Origin Array. Humiliating the elders of our guild. Do you think that our formation guild doesn't exist? Face Like Cream followed. Ha! Who was the one who said that he would turn my world upside down and kill me? Xiao Yi? Do you really think that I, Xiao Yi, am just a decoration? Xiao Yi took a step forward and stood in front of Murong Shi. Their faces were almost touching. The Beast Emperor has said that if he sees the Murong clan and the Qi clan of the northern borderline, he must teach them a lesson. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The four high-level Beast Emperors led by the Medicine Valley moved swiftly and split into four corners, sandwiching the ministers and generals of the Northern Yin and Northern Qi in the middle. Although Murong Shi and Qi Fa were Emperor level, they might not have the upper hand against the four high-level Beast Emperors from Medicine Valley. After all, the four Beast Emperors had transformed into their huge bodies, and physical damage was almost useless against them. Following this, 10 burly figures descended from the dark mass of magical beasts flying high in the sky. When the 10 burly figures landed, their powerful legs sent the stone slabs flying. The ground collapsed under their bodies, and a wild aura rushed toward them. The generals of the Northern Yin and Northern Borderline were so shocked by the 10 burly figures that they clutched their chests. Their expressions changed drastically, and they could not help but step back. In front of them were 10 8-meter-tall centaur warriors, with thick horse hooves and a body of a bear. They were more than 20 meters long, and they were holding giant axes. Centaurs were ancient beasts with the blessings of the gods in their bodies. They were extremely intelligent and powerful. Not only were they immune to most physical damage, but they also had the blessings of the gods in their blood, and they were immune to 50% of origin energy damage. This was extremely terrifying. For example, a human warrior could kill an ordinary beast with a full-powered attack. However, when used on a centaur, it might only be able to take off a piece of flesh at most. Moreover, even after exhausting their origin energy, they would not even have the chance to cause internal injuries. These 10 centaur warriors, who seemed to have reached the level of Beast Venerable, could basically defeat all the generals of the Northern Borderline and Northern Qi present. Roar! The dog spirit raised its head and roared. In an instant, the 10 centaur warriors gripped their battle axes and approached the Northern Yin and Northern Qi generals. The dark mass of magical beasts in the sky flickered with resplendent light. Once the dog spirit gave the order, these lights could kill the people of Northern Yin and Northern Qi 10,000 times over. Murong Shi and Qi Fa would definitely not be unscathed if he used all his strength. Yin Lao Bei, Xiao Yi, what is the meaning of this? Qi Fa felt a great sense of danger, and he immediately turned around and shouted at the two of them. Nothing. I just don't like you guys. Qin Hao stood up, rubbing his fists. His eyes were cold. If it weren't for Brother Dog and Uncle Yan's sudden appearance, Daliao's imperial city would have been plunged into misery and suffering today. You two stinky dogs, weren't you very fierce just now? You want to kill my brother and force sister, Xiao Han, to marry your son? Try it again. Siowa raised his arm. The Shiliang cultivators roared and took a step forward at the same time. At this moment, There were 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside, surrounding Murong Shi and Chi Fa's men so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Qin Hao, don't be so arrogant. Don't think that you can do anything to me just because you have the Medicine Valley's magical beasts and Yin Lao Bei as your backing. If you have the ability, come out and fight me one-on-one. See if I don't twist your head off and kick it like a ball. Chi Fa glared at him angrily. Bah, you're Emperor Yuan who has lived for more than 100 years. Do you have any shame? How can you say that? My brother has just turned 20 years old and is only at the Yuan King realm. Xiao was spat at the other side. Qin Hao waved his hand. I won't use anyone as my backing. You want to fight one-on-one? Sure, when I reach your age, I will crush you like an ant. Ha ha ha, shameless boasting. Do you think it is so easy to cultivate to the Emperor realm? Chi Fa laughed wildly. Why are you talking nonsense with him? In fact, I think that once you reach 100 years of lifespan, Chi Fa will be nothing in front of you. All right, let's do it. Yin Laobei's gaze swept across and stared at Murong Shi. Murong Shi was a beginner 4th stage Yuan Emperor. He was the strongest on the other side. Yin Laobei, what do you want to do? Although my cultivation is not as good as yours, if I, Murong Shi, want to escape, there is no place in the world that can stop me. Murong Shi was creeped out by Yin Laobei's gaze. Of course, he was not wrong. Yuan emperors could go up to the sky and down to the earth. Even the deep sea could not stop the power of an Emperor realm cultivator. If he insisted on escaping, apart from the 9-star Great Arch, even an 8th-stage Yuan emperor would not be able to kill him directly. Then why don't you try? Yin Laobei stepped on the ground. Buzz! An oval-shaped light curtain rose out of thin air and instantly merged seamlessly above Chi Fa and Murong Shi's heads. On the light curtain, there were strange butterfly runes flying around. Obviously, this was an extremely unusual monstrous formation. 10th grade, Forbidden Origin Formation. Qin Hao blurted out in shock. The spectacular oval-shaped eggshell in front of him was not only a 10th grade formation. Moreover, Yin Laobei was also a rare spiritual array master like Nalan Li. He could instantly activate the formation with his thoughts. Although the formation that was activated with his thoughts was far from being as strong as the formation that was painstakingly prepared with materials. However, unless one's thoughts and cultivation were stronger than Yin Laobei's. Otherwise, Murong Shi and Chi Fa would not be able to escape. Even their primordial spirits would not be able to escape. Nephew Qin has good eyesight. Yin Laobei nodded at Qin Hao with appreciation. He pointed at the light curtain above everyone's heads and said, "This is indeed an forbidden origin formation that can even imprison an Emperor stage primordial spirit." The millions of people present recognized the attributes of the formation that Yin Laobei had set up at a glance. Qin Hao's ability to perceive formations was extremely monstrous. After all, not everyone could see through Yin Laobei's method. At the very least, powerful people like Murong Shi and Chi Fa could not see through it immediately. At this moment, Yin Laobei no longer doubted face like Cream's evaluation of Qin Hao. He believed that the other party was indeed a good seedling that was worthy of being trained seriously. Are you trying to scare me? Setting up an forbidden origin formation with a thought. Murong Shi did not believe it at all. His body disappeared and turned into an incomparably sharp edge that ruthlessly pierced towards the weak light curtain. Following a ding sound, Murong Shi was shaken by the light curtain and revealed his original body in a sorry state. He weakly retreated a few steps. Everyone also saw that his forehead was swollen from the impact. Let me do it. The 2 steel balls in Chi Fa's right hand suddenly shot out and turned into 2 destructive bolts that collided with the light curtain, making a deafening sound. Under the impact of the 2 magic treasures, the light curtain produced a strong fluctuation. However, in the next second, it returned to normal. It completely confirmed Yin Laobei's ability to set up formations and prove that what he said was true, whether it was attacking or transforming into primordial spirits. Shi and Chi Fa would not be able to escape the formation for a while. Nervous cold sweat involuntarily flowed from the faces of the northern yin and northern Qi ministers to the ground. Chapter 1083. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Future Disaster. Yin Laobei, you're a senior who has cultivated for almost 10 years. Don't you think it's beneath your dignity to bully me in Morongshi? Chi Fa shouted. Why don't you think it's beneath your dignity to bully my brother? Sayo would despised Chi Fa to the extreme. Both of them had the same surname. He felt embarrassed for Chi Fa. Yin Laobei, you don't have to pretend to scare us. Just tell us what you want. Only then will you let Chi Fa and me go. She took 2 deep breaths and calmed himself down. It was not easy to break the origin ceiling formation in a short time. However, it was not impossible. If they were willing to sacrifice a certain amount, the formation would not be able to trap him in Chi Fa. Even if they could not break it, Yin Laobei and Xiao, you would not dare to kill them. Unless they wanted the Formation Guild and the Daoyao Empire to disappear completely from the northern borderline. I want all of your Ling Tian Jades. Yin Laobei raised his arm and blocked Qin Hao. He coldly stated his condition to Shi. All right. Shi's palm flashed and a storage ring appeared. He threw it to Yin Laobei. Nice. Yin Laobei raised his hand and grabbed the storage ring. The Ling Tian Jades inside were his real target. He had heard that the Murong clan had found a strange type of spiritual stone from somewhere. Its material could withstand the storage and compression of Emperor Stage Yuan Qi. The Ling Tian Jades were very important to Yin Laobei's research on formations. Normally, he would not be able to get it from Shi. However, this time, it was all thanks to Qin Hao. The Murong clan will remember this grudge. Shi's facial muscles were tightly clenched. It was not hard to see that his clan had paid a hefty price to obtain this batch of Ling Tian Jades. Although he was heartbroken, he did not hesitate to hand the Ling Tian Jades over to Yin Laobei. His decisiveness could be considered as ruthless. Qin Hao silently watched from the side. He let Yin Laobei take the lead. In reality, he knew that no matter what, he could not let Chi Fa and Shi stay today. At this time, Yin Laobei looked at the treasure throne that Chi Fa's Shi. What do you want? Let me tell you, this invincible throne that I painstakingly built, I will not give it to you even if I die. Who wants your broken chair? Get out of my way. Yin Laobei swung his arm and pushed Chi Fa, who was trying to stop him, back. Then, he went up to the chair and plucked out the 10,000-year-old pearl from the top before putting it into his own pocket. This 10,000-year-old pearl had an extremely powerful effect on a 10th grade array formation. Yin Laobei had been drooling over it for a long time, and today, his wish was finally fulfilled. With the 10,000-year pearl taken away, Chi Fa was heartbroken. Nephew Qin, these 2 treasures belong to you. The things created by the Northern Frontier's Emperor of Plentiful Treasures aren't trash. You'll definitely experience their wonderful uses in the future. Yin Laobei laughed heartily and waved his sleeve. The 2 large green fans floating behind the throne automatically flew towards Qin Hao, shrinking as they flew. When they landed in Qin Hao's palm, they became the size of a pocket-sized leaf. The yin-yang fan. Qin Hao looked at the back of the 2 fans. One of them had the word yang carved on it, while the other had the word yin carved on it. Immediately, he guessed their uses and quickly put them into his spatial ring. I am my heart, my liver, Chi Fa almost fainted on the spot before he could catch his breath. The officials of Northern Qi were so frightened that they supported him and kept calling out, Emperor Qi, Emperor Qi. Yin Laobei, on the other hand, looked as if he had not had enough and carefully searched the throne 3 more times. Unfortunately, the remaining items could not be compared to the 10,000-year-old pearl and the yin-yang fan, so he lost interest in them. What a pity. Yin Laobei shook his head as he looked at the flying fire wheels that he had destroyed and walked back. He could only blame the explosion array that he had drawn for being too powerful. The flying fire wheels were completely destroyed. On the other hand, these two items could be said to be excellent flying artifacts. Can we leave now? She looked at Chi Fa, who was surrounded by the officials of Chi Kingdom. Chi Fa was gasping for air and seemed to be on the verge of death. She then looked back at Yin Laobei. Do whatever you want. I'm not stopping you. Yin Laobei spread out his hands. As he finished speaking, the 10th grade origin restriction array above everyone's head immediately became blurry and gradually disappeared. It seemed that the array's duration was up. In other words, if Chi Fa and she could hold on for a few more breaths, they would not have to pay the price of the Ling Tian stone and the 10,000-year-old pearl. Puff! Chi Fa could not hold it in anymore and fainted in the arms of his officials. Let's go. She rolled up his sleeves, and a huge light covered the people of Northern Yin. They disappeared into thin air. Under Qi Yuan's lead, the generals of Northern Qi also teleported away. Xiao Yi, Yin Laobei, let's wait and see who will be the one laughing and crying in the end. You better pray that the old monster will not come out of seclusion. Otherwise, when he comes here, you, Yin Laobei, and Xiao Yi together will not be able to stop the madness of the emperor. In the future, you'll be in big trouble. A vicious curse that was mixed with anger came from the sky. You have too much free time. Chapter 1084. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Eastern Sea had no enmity with the Shengdi old monster, so there was no reason for that old bastard to have nothing better to do than fight Yin Laobei to the death. Moreover, with Yin Laobei's skills, even if he couldn't defeat Shengdi, it would be easy for him to set up an illusion formation to transfer the formation to protect his own formation masters. However, Xiao Yi wasn't the same. As a ruler of the empire, Xiao Yi couldn't run away. With billions of citizens tied to him, Daliao wouldn't have a good ending. Don't worry. With Hao here, the holy emperor that he talks about is just a piece of trash. Vivian's eyes were serious as she confided in Hao. Vivian was telling the truth. Everyone was stunned after hearing her words. Then they burst out laughing. Yin Laobei also laughed. They all thought that Vivian was joking. How could Qin Hao be compared to Shengdi? That was the biggest joke in the world. Of course, defeating half of the continent's geniuses in the kingdom tournament was enough to prove that Qin Hao was a dragon among dragons. His future was limitless. For a moment, the whole place was filled with the voices of the sect leaders congratulating Xiao Yi. They praised him for finding a son-in-law with limitless potential. Xiaohan, forgive me for hiding something from you. I don't know if you still remember the two of them. Qin Hao moved away. It was time for his father and mother to reunite with Xiaohan. Qin Dingtian, who was standing behind Qin Hao, and Tang Rong, whose face was already covered in tears, trembled as they extended their hands toward Xiaohan. Han, do you still remember your father? Xiaohan, my child, you are. Sob. Father, mother, you are fine. You are fine. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Why didn't you? Looking at the two faces that were imprinted in her childhood memories, Xiaohan's tears gushed out like a fountain. She punched Qin Hao's chest with all her might and threw herself into Tang Rong's arms. Thousands of days and nights had passed. It was the woman who hugged her, who gave Xiaohan warm clothes and fanned herself in the middle of summer. It was the woman who was hugging her and gently coaxing her to sleep. Every new year, her mother would dress herself up and put on a new cotton-padded jacket for her. Those were the happiest times of Xiaohan's life. She recalled how Qin Dingtian picked up Xiaohan and laughed heartily as soon as he returned to the east courtyard after finishing his family business. He lifted Xiaohan above his head and threw him back and forth, scaring Xiaohan so much that Tang Rong grabbed a broom and chased Qin Dingtian all over the courtyard. Qin Hao, on the other hand, held Xiaohan's hand and laughed nonstop. His uncontrollable tears were like a door that couldn't be closed, and Xiaohan couldn't stop crying. At this moment, Xiao Yi could not help but blur his eyes as well. It was as if he had returned to that snowy night when when he had cruelly abandoned his infant child in front of someone else's house and left heartlessly with every step he took. In fact, he was extremely grateful to Qin Dingtian and Tang Rong. If it weren't for this kind-hearted couple, then his daughter would have frozen to death or been taken away by a vicious dog. Xiao, he had been waiting for this favor for more than 10 years. However, when he faced his benefactor, he was only grateful and ashamed. He was not a competent father. My in-laws, and all the sect masters and heroes, please follow me back to the palace for a feast. Tonight, we will not return until we are drunk. Xiao, he shouted heroically and waved his hand. Gongsun Changxing quickly led the way for all the heroes. Long lines of people actually entered the palace through the main entrance. It was obvious that Xiao, he had given enough face to all the factions in Western Liang. However, Qin had to not move. He was pulled back by Vivian. Vivian pulled Qin Hao away from the crowd. She released her essence chi somewhere in the plaza and set up an apotheosis realm. The two of them stayed inside the apotheosis realm and blocked everyone's sight. Vivian, are you leaving? Qin Hao seemed to have a premonition and held Vivian's hands tightly. How? I have to return to the Eastern Sea. Peng Lai has not seen their Empress Wei for 600 years. I have to go back and give them an explanation. Vivian's eyes were filled with reluctance, not only to Peng Lai, but also to Qin Hao. If you want to return to the Eastern Sea, you have to pass by the Eastern continent. Be careful of Zhang Wu and Han Lingxian. You are not their match now. Qin Hao was very nervous. He was always calm, but now he was panicking. I know. When you return to the 9-star Great Emperor, I will march to the Sunset Peak and kill the Sunset Battle God and Empress Lingxian. Vivian forced a smile and touched Qin Hao's face tenderly. Then, she suddenly turned around and was about to leave. She had to be decisive. If she was a second late, she might change her mind. Wait. Qin Hao pulled Vivian back and kissed her forehead. Then he took out the Sunset Crimson. Take it. It can protect you. Idiot, the person who should be protected is you. Vivian had refined the holy light of judgment. Not only had her sword Dao improved, but her Monarch level comprehension and cultivation had also increased greatly. On the other hand, although Qin Hao's improvement was extremely fast, he was still a weak Yuan Monarch in front of the Monarch. Vivian did not need Crimson, but in fact, Crimson did not want to stay by Vivian's side. This little guy had just gained intelligence. When it heard Qin Hao telling it to follow Vivian, it flew out of Qin Hao's palm with a flash of light. It passed through Vivian's barrier as if it was nothing and stuck to Xiao Han's hand. Vivian was shocked. She had accompanied Qin Hao for hundreds of years. Empress Ziwei knew better than anyone how powerful Crimson's ability was. Unless she could suppress Crimson by force with her heaven-suppressing ability. Otherwise, other than Qin Hao, it would not rely on or submit to anyone in the world. But now it was sticking to Xiao Han. It seems like that girl has a powerful ability that is unique to ordinary people. Vivian took a deep breath and looked through the barrier at Xiao Han, who was standing in the same spot and waiting for Qin Hao. She said to Qin Hao, "Go. She is waiting for you. Don't worry about me. I will look for you no matter where you are. Even if I go to hell, Mu Yue, will find you, Qin Hao. I will come back as soon as I finish my business in the EC." Vivian pulled her tender hand out of Qin Hao's palm. She turned her head, dispersed the barrier, and flew into the sky. She faced the wind and stayed in the sky above Daliao's imperial city. She stayed there for a full 10 breaths before shouting with all her might, "Everyone, listen up. That lame thing and the prefecture master were killed by me, Mu Yue. It has nothing to do with Emperor Xiao. If someone wants to seek revenge, ask him to come to the East Sea to find me." This shout was earth-shattering and echoed throughout the land of the northern border like thunder. Then, Vivian turned into a ray of white light and disappeared into the sacred east. This shout caused Xiao, Yi, and Yin Laobei to stop in front of the imperial palace. Their eyes were filled with shock, and they did not regain their senses for a long time. Mu Yue, this was definitely a name that was filled with awe, as well as an extremely mythical name. If it wasn't for Denda's fame that overshadowed Mu Yue's brilliance 600 years ago. Chapter 1085. Translator. Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo Studio share me a little winter moon solstice. The cold weather had arrived in the northern border earlier than that. The humidity in the middle of the night turned into frost, and a layer of fine ice crystals formed on the ground in the early morning. As the morning sun rose, the light shone on the ice crystals, shining with a large amount of sparkling luster. At this moment, a slender and tall figure walked out gracefully from the side courtyard beside the Hall of Wisdom. Qin Hao, who was wearing thin clothes, exhaled white air from his mouth and gently patted his slightly uncomfortable head twice. He didn't feel cold at all, but he was a little dizzy from drinking. Then, he looked in the direction of Xiao Yi's Hall of Righteous Virtue with a warm smile on his face. 3 days. Everyone drank wildly in the Hall of Righteous Virtue for 3 days. They drank until the sky turned upside down and the earth turned upside down. Whether it was Xiao Yi, Yi Longyuan, or Qin Hao himself, no one used their vitality to dissolve the alcohol. Instead, they savored the sweetness and fragrance of the wine in the state of mortals, cheering and celebrating together. In his half-awake, half-drunk state, Qin Hao knew that Yi Longyuan had brought Yi Shuihan and the others back to Shiliang. Dan Xian, Yao Lao, Shun Tianfeng, the old seniors, Nailan Zhengang, Emperor Zhao, and Emperor Bu had all left. However, the heavenly pact between the various tribes of Shiliang and Xiao Yi was still in effect. It was not just for show. If one day, Daliao really fell into water and fire, those who signed the heavenly pact would sincerely stand on the same side as Xiao Yi, resist foreign enemies for him, and overcome difficulties together. Because of the restrictions of the heavenly Tao, no one dared to be selfish. The magical beast army returned to the Medicine Valley the next day. Qin Hao vaguely remembered that the leader of the green-clothed beast emperor begged to stay by the dog spirit's side to take care of it. The dog spirit was the hope of the Medicine Valley, the only future leader. There could not be any mistakes. But Brother Dog did not allow it. If it had a powerful guardian by its side, protecting it at all times and taking care of it like a flower in a greenhouse, then it would not be able to fuse with the beast emperor's power of inheritance. If it wanted to absorb the power of inheritance as soon as possible, it had to constantly accept challenges, go through dangerous situations again and again, and fight with death with its life. In the end, the green-clothed beast emperor's time, after leaving 2 ancient beast clans warriors behind, it and the other 3 beast emperors led the magical beast army back to the Medicine Valley. Before he left, he reminded Qin how to always put the safety of their young master first. Otherwise, the Medicine Valley would take revenge on the human race. Of the Valley. Half of dog virtue. Qin Hao Xian dragon. Of studio of Qin nighttime dream of night. Of world of night of course. Of with of course of. However, Qin Hao knew very well that he could not stop. If he did not become stronger, then the scene of Murong, Shi, and Chi Fa coming to force him would appear a second time, a third time. He's awake? A deep and hearty middle-aged voice sounded. Qin Hao gathered his thoughts and looked to his side. He smiled and said, "Uncle Yen, MM." Yen Laobei nodded with his hands behind his back. "How is it? Come with me to the Array Formation Guild. You and Han, Er's wedding is still early. He won't be in a hurry to marry off his daughter. You have to take advantage of your youth and work hard to develop your own potential. Shuang, praised you as the one and only Qilin genius. Follow Uncle Yin back to the Array Formation Guild. I won't treat you badly. In less than 100 years, I can train you into an Array sovereign powerhouse." Yin Laobei was unusually sincere. The meaning behind his words was obvious. He was also going to leave, but he couldn't bear to miss out on Qin Hao's potential. Qin Hao scratched his ear and said, "I don't think so. I'm used to freedom. I like to go to places that I want to go and yearn for. Also, didn't Rushuang tell Uncle Yin that I'm an alchemist? You ungrateful brat. Yin Laobei shook his head and sighed in anger after being rejected by Qin Hao. He was the #1 array emperor of the northern frontier. If he wanted to take in a disciple, the number of martial artists who wanted to apply could line up from Dalyao's imperial city to the entrance of the Array Formation Guild in Liberty City. Now that the Array Emperor had personally invited him, Qin Hao didn't give him face. To put it bluntly, he was simply unteachable. Forget it, I won't force you. But if you don't do anything and he suddenly changes his mind and doesn't marry my daughter to you, don't run to Uncle Yin and cry. Yin Laobei lowered his head and chuckled. That won't happen. If that day really comes, little Han will definitely elope with me. But Uncle Yin, although I can't go to the Array Formation Guild, I can recommend someone to you. Qin Hao was about to introduce Nailin Li to Yin Laobei when Yin Laobei interrupted him. Yin Laobei waved his hand and interrupted. Who do you think I am? I'm the Array Emperor. Not just any ant that pops out of nowhere can enter my eyes. Even if it's you, Qin Hao, I only want to teach you because of Shuang. Uncle Yin, are you sure you don't want to know the person I recommend? Haha, I'm not interested at all. Yin Laobei walked past Qin Hao. All right, it's a pity that I missed out on a mind array formation genius who has the same talent as Uncle Yin. Qin Hao purposely dragged out his voice and let out a long sigh. What did you say? You're recommending someone who has the talent for mind array formation? Yin Laobei suddenly stopped in his tracks. His body trembled as he quickly turned around. In response, Qin Hao smiled and nodded. Hurry up and tell me, where is this person? He's the best candidate to inherit my legacy. I must get him, ha ha ha. Yin Laobei walked over excitedly and grabbed Qin Hao's shoulders tightly. Nailin Li, the youngest daughter of Nailin Zhenggang from the Wei Kingdom of Western Liang. Qin Hao pointed out, Nailin Zhenggang, you have such a precious daughter, but you're hiding her from me. Don't you know that she's the best candidate to learn the mind array formation? You're obviously going against me. Yin Laobei was furious. When he was drinking with Nailin Zhenggang yesterday, that old man didn't even mention a word about her. Yin Laobei gathered his strength and was about to tear open space and fly to Western Liang. Uncle Yin, wait. Qin Hao stopped him. Can you give me some of the Ling Tian jade that you took from Murongxi? I'm also interested in researching it. Although Dendu wasn't interested in mind arrays, it didn't mean that he didn't want the Ling Tian jade. A jade that could compress and store Emperor Stage Yuan Qi would definitely be useful in other aspects of the martial Dao. Here, Yin Laobei wanted to find Nailin Li, so he didn't have time to argue with Qin Hao. Normally, he would have to think about it carefully. But now, he threw the ring that Murongxi left behind to Qin Hao. Then, his figure disappeared in the blink of an eye. Following a strong spatial tremor, his aura rushed towards the direction of Western Wei. Chapter 1086. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Something happened at the tavern. Qin Hao didn't need to worry about what happened next. He held Murongxi's spatial ring and sent his mind into it. The Ling Tianyu appeared in front of him. The space inside the ring wasn't small. The Ling Tianyu inside was only left with a pitiful bowl-shaped piece. Its appearance wasn't outstanding. It was pure white and looked no different from ordinary white jade. Obviously, this was only a small part. Most of it had been moved away by Yin Laobei. Uncle Yin is so stingy. Qin Hao was a little dissatisfied. He took out the Ling Tianyu and held it in his palm to observe it carefully. Actually, he didn't know that all the Ling Tianyu added together was only the size of a bucket. What Yin Laobei left behind already took up 1/10 of the original. At this moment, Qin Hao closed his eyes. His mind power spread out from his body like spider silk and wrapped around the jade in his palm. He carefully felt what was different about the Ling Tianyu. However, when his mind power penetrated the jade, it was immediately swallowed up like a stone sinking into the sea. It was gone forever. It's really strange. Qin Hao opened his eyes in shock. It could even swallow his mind power. The swallow here referred to absorption. Qin Hao was completely sure that his mind power wasn't dissolved but stored in the jade. To verify his judgment, Qin Hao released 3 more waves of mind power. Without a doubt, the 3 waves of mind power disappeared without a trace when they came into contact with the jade. They completely cut off the connection with Qin Hao. I don't know what material the Ling Tianyu is made of. It vaguely feels familiar. Qin Hao frowned and tried to recall some of the things that had happened in the past. Just now, he released his mind power to sense it. Although each contact was only for a moment, it was enough to conclude that it had the ability to swallow like Zhou Wudao's soul. However, it should have a limit. Qin Hao nodded. He gathered power at his fingertips, and the golden finger flashed. From the bowl-shaped jade, a finger-sized piece was fiercely poked out. Then a huge amount of mind power rushed toward the finger-sized piece of Ling Tianyu again. Boom! Zhang Xian sent his will into it, but he was still stuck in a quagmire, unable to receive any response. Seeing this, Qin Hao opened his red lotus fiery pupils. 2 rays of sharp light shot out from his eyes, and in a flash, the Ling Tian jade, which was the size of a finger cap, was smashed into pieces. After it was smashed into pieces, it turned into a large amount of crystal debris that looked like frost on the ground. Then, he sent a surge of his mental power into one of the dregs. This time, it wasn't cut off. Qin Hao's consciousness could freely wander inside the residue and spy on its attributes. A moment later, Qin Hao nodded. He had basically figured out the structure of the Ling Tianyu. Apart from being able to carry the power of the outside world, it doesn't have any other functions. Moreover, the larger the jade stone, the more energy it can store. If there were no accidents, not only could the spiritual power and vitality be stored by the Ling Tianyu, even the 5 elements of yin and yang, as well as the elements of heaven and earth, were all within its tolerance range. There was a great deal to be done about this. Qin Hao thought for a moment. The reason why Yin Laobei wanted Murong Shi's Ling Tianyu was to modify formations and strengthen them. For example, to expand the power of the 10th grade Forbidden Yuan formation. Then Qin Hao could use it to forge weapons. When he was forging the Divine Soldier, he could inlay a piece of Ling Tian jade into the weapon and draw a small-scale, devouring Yuan formation. He could completely channel the enemy's fatal Yuan Qi attack into the Ling Tian jade and let it store Yuan Qi. If he used it well, he could catch the enemy off guard and make them lose their focus. At that time, it would be the best opportunity for him to counterattack. Even better, if he could store the enemy's full strength attack into the Ling Tian jade and then suddenly release it, it would be like Tai Guai Li's reflection. Good idea. Qin Hao was immediately attracted by his own idea. The Ling Tian jade was indeed a miraculous item. However, its only weakness was the material was very fragile. The golden finger and red lotus fiery pupils that Qin Hao used were not strong and could easily shatter it. In the future, if he wanted to use it to defeat the enemy, the first thing he had to do was to ensure its safety. This was the Ling Tian jade's weakness. If the jade were to shatter, all of its effects would be gone. I wonder where Murong Shi got the Ling Tian jade. Why does it smell like the inside of the Valley of the Gods? Qin Hao recalled, and put the Ling Tian jade back into his spatial ring. As he walked, he thought seriously. If his judgment was correct, the Ling Tian jade was most likely a product of the Valley of the Gods. Only the mysterious number 1 forbidden ground of the continent, the Valley of the Gods, could give birth to such a strange, evil item. However, with Murong Shi's emperor rank, he did not have the right to step into the inner area of the Valley of the Gods. Even protecting himself in the outer area was a huge worry. Qin Hao personally experienced how dangerous the Valley of the Gods was. In his previous life, when Dindu was at his peak, he was accompanied by Han Lingxian and Zhan Wu, 2 peerless experts. The 3 of them were very careful. Even with the sunset God Bao, when they reached the Valley of the Gods, they were already covered in injuries. Murong Shi was a beginner rank for emperor rank. If he dared to charge into the inner area of the Valley of the Gods, he would not be able to withstand a single mechanism and would definitely lose his life. It seems like there is an even stronger person behind the Murong family of the northern border. Qin Hao's mood became heavy. His intuition told him that the Ling Tian jade was not something that Murong Shi could obtain. It was his collaborator, the person who had the ability to enter the inner area of the Valley of the Gods, who gave Murong Shi the Ling Tian jade. Or it could be said that the collaborator was the true backer and master of the Murong family. Thinking about this point, Qin Hao's mood did not relax. He had not even recovered 1% of his previous life's cultivation. A single Saint Emperor old monster from the Medicine Emperor Pavilion would not do anything excessive to Xiao, Yi, and the Daoyao Empire on account of Qin Hao's kindness in the past. Jiang Wufa and Jiang Fengyo's deaths would at most be left unsettled. However, Murong Shi was different. If this thing wanted to kill Xiao, Yi, there would be no room for negotiation between the two sides. Qin Hao temporarily buried this worry in his heart. It would be better if he did not tell Uncle Xiao to avoid alerting the enemy and attracting the attention of the person behind Murong Shi. Leaving the palace through the main gate, Qin Hao wanted to return to the Goodman Tavern to see Sir one last time. Moreover, Gongshu Jian, who was researching mechas, was still recuperating in the Goodman Tavern. Qin Hao held the Ling Tian jade in his hand. This time, he was not afraid that he would not be able to move Gongshu Jian's heart. Passing through the streets, whether it was the patrolling Imperial Guards or the commoners, after seeing Qin Hao, they all bowed respectfully. They were joyful and affectionate as they called out, "Prince Consort." Qin Hao smiled and greeted everyone in a friendly manner. He had not put on any airs. When he met cute children, he would generously give them New Year's money. However, this happy mood turned into cold, killing intent the moment he returned to the Goodman Tavern. Qin Hao was filled with killing intent. Something happened at the Goodman Tavern. Chapter 1087. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations, is he still heavy? In the tavern, a fist wind flashed, and Gongshu Jian's tall and sturdy body was thrown high into the air, crashing into the wall of the tavern. A layer of fine cracks appeared on the wall, and before Gongshu Jian could get up, a foot immediately stepped on his chest. Without that cold-blooded machine, you still dare to be fierce to me. You really don't know how to spell death. The person stepping on Gongshu Jian was a young man with a donkey face. The donkey-faced youth bent down and looked down at Gongshu Jian, the corners of his mouth full of ridicule. You can't even withstand a single blow. How can you qualify for the finals with such a level? You're dirtying my eyes. Behind the young man with a donkey face, 4 of his companions laughed and surrounded him. Second brother Donkey, ask him to contribute the prizes he won in the finals. If not, Big Brother Saber will taste blood. One of them, who was quite muscular and had a beard, slowly pulled out a heavy saber from his back. The saber light was dense and murderous. He stared unkindly at Gongshu Jian's legs and hands and licked his lips cruelly. These 5 people's cultivation levels were not very high. The one called Second Brother Donkey was a low-level Yuan Monarch. The one with the fiercest aura, the big bearded man, was only a level 4 Yuan Monarch. However, this group of third-rate martialists, who could not even make it to the semifinals, suppressed Gongshu Jian, who had made it to the finals. At this moment, Gongshu Jian was really sad. Everyone, please be merciful. Don't harm our tavern anymore. Prince Consort Qin Hao is our tavern's benefactor. I still have his room. Who knows when he will return? Furthermore, this warrior is greatly appreciated by the Prince Consort. Aren't you afraid that Qin Hao will blame you when he returns? The old tavern owner, who was close to 70 years old, knelt on the ground and pointed at Gongshu Jian, who was at the feet of a young man with a donkey face, pleading. When the words Qin Hao were blurted out, the tavern fell into dead silence. Who did not know that Qin Hao was the overall champion of the 4 competition zones and the son-in-law of Emperor Xiao? The young man with a donkey face and the big bearded man shuddered violently. However, they quickly regained their composure. Qin Hao. Right now, he was like the sun in the sky, living a carefree and happy life in the imperial palace. Once he soared, who would still remember his shabby little tavern? Don't use his name to scare me. The donkey-faced youth was certain that Qin Hao would not return. Not only that, I also heard that he has offended several peak characters in the northern border. The Saint Emperor of the Medicine Emperor Loft, the Manor Emperor of the Moon Severing Manor, and even the Qi and Yin Emperors. The Yin Emperor once said that when the old monster Shang Di comes out of seclusion, Daliao will be plunged into misery and suffering. Maybe that day will be the doomsday of the Daliao Empire. Xiao is dead. What can Qin Hao, who has a woman's thigh, do? Everyone laughed. Maybe when the Daliao Empire is destroyed, Princess Jingwei will become a plaything that everyone can humiliate. If we brothers are lucky enough, maybe we can even taste the daughter of the emperor. The big bearded man's imagination ran wild. He touched his chin wretchedly with one hand, and his eyes were filled with filth. Their words were extremely disgraceful. According to their crime, 9 generations of their family should be executed. However, the Good Citizen Tavern was located outside the imperial city. Its geographical location was extremely remote. There were no imperial guards patrolling the area, let alone maintaining order. Therefore, even though the donkey-faced youth and his companions were causing trouble here, no one cared. Hearing their words, the old tavern owner's heart suddenly turned cold. He shook his head and sighed sorrowfully. That's right. Man walked to the top while water flowed to the bottom. Qin Hao had become the emperor's son-in-law. How could he still care about this little tavern? Now we are lawless. We are tyrannical. No one can control us. Gongshu Jian, hurry up and hand over the treasure you got. My patience has reached its limit. The big bearded man shouted. He raised his arm high. If Gongshu Jian dared to say a word, his broadsword would turn into a ruthless killing tool. A tiger will be bullied by a dog. A group of jumping clowns. Spit. Gongshu Jian spat a mouthful of spit on the big bearded man's face. His ancestors. The big bearded man was extremely angry. He stared at Gongshu Jian and chopped down on his legs. The old tavern owner was so scared that he quickly covered his eyes. At this time, Qin Hao just stepped in. He was the first to take action. At the same time, there was another person who was not slow. The roof of the first floor of the tavern was suddenly pierced by an external force. 2 rays of light followed the broken floor and pierced the big bearded man's palm from the second floor. 1 ray of light broke the big bearded man's blade. The other ray of light broke his palm. The broken blade fell and landed right on the bearded man's foot, causing his foot to split apart. The big bearded man screamed miserably. He lost his balance and fell to the ground with a bang. The second Qin Hao stepped in. A powerful force turned into a ray of light from his body. With a bang, it hit the chest of the donkey-faced man. The donkey-faced man looked like he was hit by a boulder. He spat out blood. His whole body turned into a meat patty, sticking to the wall of the tavern. How could it be? Who is it? The companions of the big bearded man and the donkey-faced man were shocked. They raised their heads and saw a handsome and tall figure coming in from the door. His figure was imposing, giving people a heavy pressure. Not to mention that Qin Hao was furious. It's young Master Qin. Oh no, it's Prince Consort. The old tavern owner was overjoyed at first, but then he realized that he had misspoken. He was so scared that he quickly put his head on the ground and did not dare to raise his head again. As for the donkey-faced man and the big bearded man's companions, their legs were trembling. Their eyes were panicked. Yellow liquid flowed from their crotch to the ground. Are you all right? Qin Hao first glanced at the donkey-faced man who had turned into a meat patty on the wall. Then, he reached out his hand to Gongshu Jian. Gongshu Jian suppressed his excitement and forced a smile. He held Qin Hao's hand and stood up. Plop, plop, plop. Then, the remaining 3 men, who were scared out of their wits, all knelt in front of Qin Hao. Prince Consort, please forgive us. Please spare our lives. Don't bother with us. Get lost. Qin Hao was too lazy to pay attention to them. Killing these little bastards would only dirty his hands. Yes, we'll get lost. We'll get lost immediately. Thank you, Prince Consort, for not killing us." The three men stood up in a panic. They supported the big, bearded man with a broken leg and ran outside. It was not that they had forgotten about the donkey-faced man, but that the donkey-faced man could not be saved. Wait. At this time, the big, bearded man with a broken leg pushed his companions away. He stood at the door and glared at Qin Hao. "Aren't you too harsh? We are also people with dignity." Qin Hao was stunned. He dared to question him. "Ha ha, harsh." Qin Hao laughed. With a flash of light in his palm, he chopped off the head of the big, bearded man with a sword. The head rolled at the feet of his three companions. "Is it still heavy?" Qin Hao looked at the three companions of the big, bearded man. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Chapter 1088. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations Su. Su's whereabouts looking at the three fleeing people. Qin Hao didn't kill them. As the emperor's son-in-law, his every word and action represented the royal family. He did not want to be known as a bloodthirsty man. But Qin Hao didn't mind killing a few more people like Big Beard who didn't know anything. Qin Hao was not a bloodthirsty man, but he was not merciful either. "Friend upstairs, can you come down for a chat?" He glanced at the broken blade. It was a low-grade king artifact with a weak inscription. It would be a good weapon in the hands of an ordinary martial artist, but it was easily broken by someone. This person's cultivation was not inferior to Iron Crutch Lee's, or even higher. Congratulations to Brother Qin Hao for becoming the Prince Consort of Great Liao. You and Zhou Wu Dao fought a battle of life and death, making me admire you to the extreme. Along with the laughter, a gentle, refined, and rather handsome scholar walked down from the second floor. "It's you." Qin Hao saw a familiar face. Zheng Qingqi. He was the martial artist from the southern region who ranked higher than Duan Ziju in the top 10 competition. In the final battle, he and Yi Shuihan were evenly matched. Because they appreciated each other, they chose to be defeated together and were eliminated. Zheng Qingqi was very happy that Qin Hao still recognized him. He smiled and nodded. "Why didn't you go back to the southern region?" Qin Hao asked. The imperial martial competition was over. Everyone had left. "I'm used to being idle. Daliao's scenery is good, so I want to stay in the northern region for a while to play." Zheng Qingqi dug out a table that wasn't too badly damaged from the ground. Then, he found a few chairs and sat down. Qin Hao and Gongshu Jian looked at each other and sat down. But they did not believe Zheng Qingqi. His excuse was too childish. With Qin Hao's ability to judge people, he guessed that Zheng Qingqi's background was not ordinary. His family was not simple. Perhaps it was because Zheng Qingqi didn't get the desired ranking in the competition and was afraid that he would be punished by the elders of his family or ridiculed by his peers. That was why he didn't return. Cough, cough. I really like the folk customs of the northern frontier, especially this cold climate. It really makes me reluctant to leave. However, it's really a bit cold. Seeing Qin Hao and Gongshu Jian's suspicious eyes, Zheng Qingqi was extremely embarrassed. Qin Hao and Gongshu Jian ignored him. What happened just now? Qin Hao examined Gongshu Jian's injuries. They were all superficial wounds and were not serious. A man's wealth is his own ruin. Gongshu Jian reluctantly took out a book of martial arts from his bosom and casually threw it on the table. This was the reward for entering the finals. An impressive mid-tier Earth-grade fist skill. But Gongshu Jian could not practice it. Even if he practiced it, he wouldn't be able to unleash the power that the fist technique should have. Qin Hao immediately understood that it was the gangsters who coveted the treasure. Losing the mecha reduced me to the point of being wantonly bullied by ants. I'll let you see a joke. Gongshu Jian looked at Qin Hao and said. At this time, the old restaurant manager brought several plates of beef and a pot of hot wine. Qin Hao poured a cup of hot wine and smiled faintly. Disappointment is only temporary. I look forward to your comeback. By the way, where is Su and the Su family? If Su was here, he would not let Gongshu Jian be bullied. The tavern was so deserted. Qin Hao knew that Su might have left. Su, that boy. He has been waiting for you for a long time. Gongshu Jian sighed and fell into his memories. In the final battle of the finals, watching Qin Hao defeat Zhou Wudao and suppress Princess Daliao, Su Su shouted loudly outside the arena and cried with joy. However, closely followed by the arrival of Emperor Yin and Emperor Qi, the hostile atmosphere was suffocating. The Su family, including Gongshu Jian, were too weak to stay in the Imperial Martial Square. When the crisis was resolved, the heroes followed Xiao Yi into the palace. The Su family arrived late. Moreover, with their qualifications, they were not qualified to enter the palace and receive a grand reception. Su Su had been waiting outside the palace for Qin Hao for a long time. However, at that time, Qin Hao happened to be drunk in the Jingda Hall. Su Su boy waited for you for 3 days. You didn't return. In the end, his father took the Su family back to Yu country. Gongshu Jian said. What? Su Er's father? Qin Hao was very surprised and bluffed. Yes, it's his biological father. Gongshu Jian nodded seriously. Recalling the scene at that time, in the bitter cold, a young man with a long sword on his back stood like a statue at the entrance of the palace. His eyes looked deeply into the palace. No matter how the guards drove him away, he refused to leave. Su don't wait. Sir has already become the emperor's son-in-law. He won't come to see us again. The Su family's great elder patted Su Su's shoulder and shook his head. Sir is not that kind of person. Su Su's eyes were a little red. He turned around and glared at the great elder. Although he said so, he had waited for 3 days. If Qin Hao really missed him, why didn't he come to take him into the palace? Sir is not that kind of person. He must be entangled with something. Su Su comforted himself while wiping his tears. Sir, great elder. Ha ha ha, it's really you. At this time, an ecstatic voice came from behind. This voice was very familiar to Su Su and the great elder. It was imprinted in the depths of their hearts. Every time the Su family was in trouble, it gave them the greatest sense of security. When they turned around, Su Su's eyes were immediately wet. A tall, stalwart, and amiable face looked at Su Su excitedly. It was the Su family's patriarch who had disappeared for many years, Su Qinghao. How could it be? Su Su thought he was dreaming. A while ago, a silly uncle who claimed to be his father's friend told him that Su Qinghao had unfortunately passed away and gave his father's belongings to Su Su. Ha ha ha, my good son, let me hug you. When I was on my way back to the family, I heard that Emperor Xiao was holding a competition. I guessed that the Su family would definitely not miss it, so I came here. Ha, I guessed correctly. Tell me, what's your rank? Su Qinghao ran up excitedly and hugged Su Su tightly. Feeling his father's warmth, Su Su knew that he was not dreaming. He suddenly realized that the uncle who claimed to be his father's friend might be fake. Chapter 1089. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation subduing Gongshu Jian. Su Su is smart. Connecting the dots, he deduced that you arranged someone to use his father's name to send that gift. Gongshu Jian explained as he threw a piece of beef in his mouth. Su Su didn't blame Qin Hao at all. On the contrary, Qin Hao took the rare pill that he made and said it was given by Su Qinghao. This kind of behavior made Su Su feel a strong sense of warmth and care. Although it was self-defeating, that's good. At least Su Er's future will be perfect and happy. Qin Hao smiled embarrassedly, raised his head and drank the wine. With Su Qinghao taking care of Su Su, he was relieved of his worries. What about you? What's your plan next? Qin Hao looked at Gongshu Jian. Gongshu Jian was stunned. He stopped chewing and slowly lowered his head. His eyes were blank. He really didn't know what to do. What could he do? His mission was to restore the glory of the mechanical race. But the mech was destroyed and almost everything was taken away from him. Rebuild it? Gongshu Jian shook his head. How difficult. Collecting the materials to build the mech was not an easy task. Every component would affect the stability of the mech. Although the destroyed mech was old and broken, it used up the effort and energy of several generations of the Gongshu family. Relying on him alone, he was lonely and helpless. He couldn't afford to build a new mech. Follow me. I can provide you with everything you want. Meteorites, 10,000 years old cold iron, storage crystals, and skilled craftsmen. Your team has everything. Maybe one day, I can fulfill your dream of making the mech race on the battlefield again. Qin Hao stared at Gongshu Jian. His eyes were very serious. Moreover, Qin Hao had enough ability. This, Gongshu Jian was a little moved. The other party was Daliao's son-in-law. He was also a genius pursued by many forces in Western Liang. He didn't doubt Qin Hao's strong capital. However, Gongshu Jian still shook his head. I cannot promise you. Whether it is the Mo family or our Gongshu family, since ancient times, the mechanical clan will not work for any power or individual. I am really sorry. We only fight for our dreams. Qin Hao took a deep breath. He had been rejected one after another, including this time. He was not surprised. With just a few words, if Gongshu Jian was taken in as a subordinate, the other party would not be qualified to be called mechanical engineer. What if I give you this? Qin Hao's palm flashed, and a fist-sized jade appeared in it. He placed the jade stone under the noses of Gongshu Jian and Zheng Qingqi. The two of them stared at it blankly. The jade stone was pure white and flawless, emitting a layer of milky white halo. It was like an ancient treasure that contained endless power. The two men's eyes were immediately attracted to it, and their breathing quickened. This item was no stranger to them. Although the color is different, its aura is the same as the high heaven jade in Murong Zijuan's hand. It's Zheng Qingqi wanted to say, but it was exactly the same. At this moment, Qin Hao smiled and nodded. Boom! Gongshu Jian felt as if all the blood in his body was rushing to his head. He stretched out his trembling hand, and regardless of whether Qin Hao agreed or not, he directly held the high heaven jade in his palm. He closed his eyes and reveled in it, feeling the luster and warmth of the jade stone. He was like a father who had just given birth to a child, so attentive and caring. Perhaps his strength was far inferior to Qin Hao's, but as a mechanical engineer, Gongshu Jian had a perception that ordinary people could not understand. He could clearly feel that the stability of the high heaven jade was extremely high, and it had a powerful spirituality that could carry all things in the world. This was the most ideal product to be used as the heart of a mecha and the energy source of martial power. It could also be said to be the most perfect thing. Thinking about it carefully, the small ring that Murong Zijuan threw out back then could actually contain nearly 10% of Emperor Yuan's vitality. At this time, the jade stone in Gongshu Jian's hand was as big as an adult's fist. It was dozens of times bigger than Murong Zijuan's. How terrifying would the power it carried be? Gongshu Jian did not dare to think further. The cultivation of every Emperor Yuan in the world was different. Perhaps the power contained in the high heaven jade in his hand was not comparable to the power of a peak Emperor Yuan. However, Gongshu Jian completely believed that he could at least use this high heaven jade to create a shocking mecha monster comparable to Emperor Yuan. Although it was a fake Emperor Yuan, it was enough to make the martial artists of the continent panic. How is it? Qin Hao knew that Gongshu Jian's faith had been completely shaken and even collapsed, so he hurriedly asked, "Are you really willing to give it to me?" Gongshu Jian opened his eyes and replied in an incredulous tone. Qin Hao nodded solemnly. "Follow me, and you will have complete control over it, even if you end up researching a pile of useless garbage." Qin Hao did not restrict Gongshu Jian's freedom. He only allowed him to research the mecha. In other words, if Gongshu Jian was unhappy, he could leave at any time, and Qin Hao would not make things difficult for him. At this moment, Gongshu Jian's brows furrowed tightly, and his heart trembled nonstop. He knew very well that there was only one chance. If he grasped it, he might be able to cause an earth-shaking turmoil in the continent, or even change an era. He would be famous for eternity and become the #1 mechanical engineer in history, surpassing any other mechanical engineer in history. Restoring the glory of the mechanical race was not just a dream. Chapter 1090. Opening of the South Pole Temple. Brother, you don't need to be so courteous. I've been waiting for your words for a long time. Qin Hao laughed heartily. He stepped forward and pulled Gongshu Jian up. The two of them hugged. After this hug, the Haoqi alliance had gained another great general, and he had gained another brother. Thanks to Prince Consort's generosity, I swear to you that in less than 5 years, I will definitely come up with a work that will shock the entire continent to repay you. Gongshu Jian's mood was also surging to the extreme. In fact, from the first time they met, he could tell that Qin Hao was deliberately trying to get close to him. Qin Hao must be up to something. However, not everyone was as forthright and sincere as Qin Hao, who didn't restrict Gongshu Jian's freedom and boldly let him do whatever he wanted. Moreover, there were not many people who thought that the mechanical race was valuable. Those who truly had the ability to carry out the research of mechanical engineers were even rarer. Gongshu Jian believed in his own judgment. Choosing Qin Hao was not wrong. Fine, I look forward to the day your great work is born. Take Ling Tianyu to find Duan Ziju. He will arrange for people to escort you back to Western Yang. Once you arrive, King Qi will arrange everything you need. Qin Hao patted Gongshu Jian's shoulder. He asked Duan Ziju to arrange for experts to escort Gongshu Jian because he was worried that Gongshu Jian would lose his mind on the road. Firstly, the other party's cultivation was too weak. Secondly, the amount of Ling Tian jade in his hands was already more than half of what Qin Hao had. Whether it was a person or a piece of jade, they were both invaluable treasures. Gongshu Jian nodded happily and dashed out the door, heading straight for the warlord mansion. Congratulations, Brother Qin. You've recruited a talent. The mechanical race has disappeared in the long river of history for thousands of years. You've actually caught one today. You're really lucky. Zheng Qingqi stood up and congratulated. His words were filled with jealousy. It was obvious that he was jealous of Qin Hao. Not only was he jealous that the other party had Gongshu Jian, but he was also jealous of Qin Hao's Ling Tianyu. However, the two of them were not very familiar with each other, so Zheng Qingqi was too embarrassed to ask for one. Oh, Brother Zheng's view of the mechanical race does not seem to be the vulgar view of the continent's commoners. Qin Hao smiled faintly. At this moment, he suddenly realized that Zheng Qingqi had inexplicably come to the Good People Tavern for Gongshu Jian, and not because he was bored. Fortunately, Qin Hao was one step ahead of them. Those who despise the mechanical race are all idiots. They look outdated, but in truth, they have unlimited potential. I didn't mean to, but since the heavens allowed me to meet Zheng Qingqi's expression changed before he could finish his sentence. At this moment, there was a rumbling sound and the sky exploded. The commotion was so great that it was several times larger than when Yi Longyuan and Xiao Yi had concluded the heavenly pact. The floor of the tavern was shaking. Judging from the commotion, there was an 80% chance that the sound had spread across the entire continent. Qin Hao and Zheng Qingqi broke through the door almost at the same time. The moment they rushed out of the tavern, they looked up and saw that in the distant sky, there was a huge and dazzling holy sword emblem. It tore through the clouds and even took away the light of the sun, covering the sky above the earth. This emblem was very sacred, and the holy sword condensed by the light was also very huge. It seemed that if it slid down in the next second, it would be able to pierce through the entire earth and tear the continent into pieces. The overwhelming divine power made all living things tremble in fear. Seeing this scene, Qin Hao and Zheng Qingqi's faces showed disbelief and horror at the same time. South Pole Divine Palace. Qin Hao blurted out in shock. Even Dinda's temperament could not bear the strong shock brought by this mighty holy sword. The mighty holy sword emblem, hanging high in the sky, was the emblem of a sect. It was the symbol of the continent's most mysterious, most powerful, and invincible sect. Even the Tai Chi divine sect, which Qin Hao had founded in his previous life, was small and insignificant compared to the South Pole Divine Palace. This was because the South Pole Divine Palace had once produced a divine-level expert who had successfully broken through the heavenly Tao and ascended to the divine realm. Although it was only a legend, Almost all the Emperor-level experts knew that it was not a legend, but an existence that had really happened. This showed how powerful the South Pole Divine Palace was. They could even cultivate a terrifying person who had ascended to the divine realm. And its establishment and history were still a mystery in the continent. Now that the mighty Holy Sword had appeared in the mortal world, it announced that the South Pole Divine Palace had opened. Its sign was to select disciples for the sect. The deadline was 1 year later. Buzz. At this time, the space in front of the tavern was torn apart by a strong external force. Immediately after, a well-built general with a strong aura appeared in front of Qin Hao. General Xiao Ming. Qin Hao said in shock. Yes. Xiao Ming nodded and looked up at the mighty holy sword that was full of pressure in the sky. You saw it? The South Pole Divine Palace has opened, and the Martial Emperor wants you to return to the palace immediately. Understood, Qin Hao replied. Seeing this, Xiao Ming was about to tear the space and teleport back with Qin Hao. Wait a minute, brother Qin Hao. Take this. If you come to the southern region in a year, it will be much more convenient with this item. The South Pole Divine Palace has opened, and I have to return to my family. Goodbye. Chapter 1091. Translator. Nyoibo, Studio Editor. Nyoibo, Studio, the #1 sect in the continent. The opening of the South Pole Divine Palace was no small matter. Perhaps the commoners would think that the sacred sword emblem in the sky was a true deity, and that the deity was passing down some kind of decree to the world, a symbol of auspiciousness. Ordinary warriors would think that was a movement created by some almighty person practicing a technique. Only the most ancient families in the continent, or members of the royal family with a long bloodline, knew about the existence of the South Pole Divine Palace. Every time the South Pole Divine Palace opened, it would set off a storm of blood in the circle of ancient families. This time was no exception, because it was located in a mysterious and unknown place in the South region. The South region would definitely become a hot region in the continent next year. If Qin Hao wanted to become a disciple of the South Pole Divine Palace, he would not miss the opportunity to go to the South region. The conditions and competition for the South Pole Divine Palace's disciples were extremely fierce, even crueler than the Emperor Martial competition. Although Zheng Qingqi's family was extraordinary, he did not have absolute confidence that he could pass the challenge. Therefore, he took the initiative to express his goodwill to Qin Hao, and hoped that when the day came, he could go hand in hand with Qin Hao and defeat the other candidates. But there was one thing that Zheng Qingqi did not expect. He did not expect Qin Hao to be familiar with the sacred sword emblem and react faster than him, calling out the name of the South Pole Divine Palace. It was really beyond Zheng Qingqi's expectations. After Zheng Qingqi left, Qin Hao immediately followed Xiao Ming and teleported in front of Xiao Yi. Accompanied by a feeling of dizziness, Qin Hao opened his eyes and found himself in the Hall of Righteous Virtue. Xiao Yi sat on the dragon throne, Duan Zhanfei sat on the left side of Xiao Yi, and Gongsun Changxing stood on the right. Ming, Cheng, Xian, and Zhu, the 4 primitive emperors, except for Xiao Ming, stood behind Xiao Yi, full of aura. As expected of a high-level primitive emperor, such powerful teleportation made me feel dizzy. Qin Hao hit his head heavily and resisted the urge to vomit. Because he was too impatient, Xiao Ming's method of activating his vital qi was too violent and barbaric. Even Qin Hao's half-god body was unable to withstand it. His realm was indeed too low. After putting the token that Zheng Qingqi gave him into his pocket, Qin Hao smiled at Xiao Yi and said, Uncle Xiao, Uncle Duan, General Manager Changxing, good day to you all. Congratulations. Everyone nodded slightly. You brat. Xiao Yi cursed in a low voice. The champion of the Imperial Martial Competition should be addressed as father-in-law. But he was too lazy to argue with Qin Hao. Xiao Yi pointed at the holy sword emblem that still had a vague image outside the window. See it? Yes, I saw it. The South Pole Divine Palace is warning the mainland that its signs have officially begun. The time for the competition is next year at this time. Qin Hao stopped smiling and became serious again. What do you think? Xiao Yi tapped his fingers on the table, wanted to hear Qin Hao's opinion. Of course we have to go. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. There's no doubt about it. Qin Hao replied decisively. Then he glanced at Duan Zhanfei and the others. They nodded in response, indicating that they agreed with Qin Hao. The South Pole Divine Palace hid the secret to entering the Divine Realm. Anyone with a sincere martial heart would not allow themselves to miss this opportunity. This was because the South Pole Divine Palace was probably the only way to break through the cursed bottleneck of the Emperor Realm. Of course, Qin Hao would not tell anyone that apart from the South Pole Divine Palace, Qin Hao himself already had the ability to break through the Emperor Realm. You're worth teaching. Qin Hao's answer satisfied Xiao Yi. At the same time, Xiao Yi's tone carried a trace of helplessness. Perhaps he felt that Qin Hao did not know how powerful the South Pole Divine Palace was. The newborn calf was not afraid of the tiger, and his courage was commendable. Originally, I planned to wait for another 2 days and choose an auspicious day to officially appoint Han as the crown prince of Daliao. After waiting for me for 100 years, I would let her succeed the throne and you would assist her. Now that the South Pole Divine Palace is inexplicably activated, my plan has been completely disrupted. The appointment of the crown prince or your marriage with Han will have to be delayed as much as possible. Xiao Yi sighed. In fact, the appointment of the crown prince was not urgent. With Xiao Yi's situation, even if his lifespan was burning extremely fast, it would not be a problem for him to last for another 10 to 20 years. But the marriage between Qin Hao and Xiao Han was far from that simple. Xiao Han's bloodline was too noble, and it was not suitable for her to lose her virginity. Before his cultivation reached Emperor Yuan, Xiao Yi did not approve of Qin Hao and his daughter having too much physical contact. That would cause great harm and impact on Xiao Han's cultivation. As for the secret of Xiao Han's birth and bloodline, Xiao Yi had not revealed it to Qin Hao yet. Now that the South Pole Divine Palace was about to open, his son-in-law should not be in the mood to be romantically involved. In fact, Qin Hao had long seen this point. Qin Hao didn't care. He was satisfied as long as he was with Xiao Han. From Uncle Zhao's tone, you seem to have some understanding of the South Pole Divine Palace? Qin Hao focused on the signs of the next year. Qin Hao really knew nothing about the conditions of the signs. In his previous life, before the South Pole Divine Palace opened, he was schemed against by Zhang Wu and Han Lingxian in advance, and was besieged by the 10 great Yuan emperors in the God Burial Valley. There was a trace of worry in Xiao Yi's tone just now. It was obvious that he had no confidence in Qin Hao. The South Pole Divine Palace is a very powerful sect that martial artists yearn for. At the same time, it is also an incomparably terrifying and chilling man-eating hell. Xiao Yi's eyes were full of fear. Chapter 1092. Translator. Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo Studio Righteous? Evil? Furthermore, Xiao Yi had heard of these secrets from another person. That person was a previous disciple of the South Pole Divine Palace. He was Yin Laobei. At this point, the warlord Duan Zhanfei, the 4 sovereigns of Ming, Cheng, Xian, and Zhu, and Gongsun Changxing all held their breaths and listened attentively. In fact, they had never participated in the number 1 sex recruitment. The last election was 500 years ago, which was 100 years after Qin Hao's death in his previous life. At that time, Yin Laobei was still a second-rate warrior in the northern borderline. Although he had some fame there, it could not be compared to his current achievements. That was because he had made it at the right time and successfully became a disciple of the South Pole Divine Palace. Furthermore, he was the only warrior from the previous election who came back alive. He was the only lucky one. What? Uncle Yin is a disciple of the South Pole Divine Palace? Qin Hao was surprised. Yes. Xiao Yi nodded. Brother Yin and I have known each other for a long time, and we have a very close relationship. He is Xiao Yi's teacher, and besides the warlord, he is Xiao Yi's best friend. According to Brother Yin, the age of the participants is the same as the emperor-marshal competition. They cannot be more than 30 years old. There is no lower limit for the lowest age. Of course, from a sex standpoint, there is no lower limit for the participants. However, the big families and the royal family will not send their underage children. No one is a fool. Even the most talented disciple will only be a stepping stone for the enemy if he does not grow up and his realm and cultivation is not as good as the opponent. The meaning of Xiao Yi's words could not be more obvious. Everyone who participated in the recruitment was the strongest warrior under 30 years old. That's right, it was the strongest, not the most talented. It was useless to have high potential. Even if you could be killed in one hit, you still had a chance to become a disciple of the South Pole Divine Palace. Qin Hao nodded. According to this limit, he was not afraid of anyone. As long as he did not meet an primitive emperor, he would not lose. As for those under 30 years old, there was no primitive emperor. Of course, Qin Hao did not dare to say he was the best. At least, the battle with Zhou Wudao made him understand that there were still many people among his generation who could threaten Qin Hao. Zhou Wudao was so strong, but among the rising stars of the great Zhou Empire, he was only ranked second. In the entire East Continent, the national power of the great Zhou Empire was far inferior to the #1 superpower, East Qin. East Qin was the recognized #1 empire on the continent. The talents of their country were above Zhou Wudao's. According to your conditions, participating in the Omen can only be considered passable. At least you have the ability to protect yourself. Even if you can't win, you can still retreat. I believe that as long as you, Qin Hao, want to run, no one below the primitive emperor can stop you. Xiao Yi looked at Qin Hao seriously. A son-in-law and half-son? It would be a lie to say that he wasn't worried. I will remember. I will not recklessly put myself in danger. Qin Hao nodded earnestly and asked again. The South Pole Divine Palace selected disciples because they went through a lot of hardships to leave behind the best to the younger generation. Why did father-in-law say that it is a man-eating hell? Also, Uncle Yin was the only one who came out alive in the last batch. How could Yin Lao Bei be the only disciple that he had nurtured with such painstaking effort? Qin Hao did not believe that Yin Lao Bei was the strongest one, because it was determined from the innate conditions that Yin Lao Bei, as a formation master, was not as strong as a pure martial artist. Regarding this point, Zhan Wang also had a doubtful attitude. I don't know. Xiao Yi shook his head solemnly and recalled the scene when he talked with Yin Lao Bei. Yin Lao Bei only knew that he was a disciple of the South Pole Divine Palace and participated in the South Pole Divine Palace. As for how he was selected, how the sect trained him, and his life in the South Pole Divine Palace, Yin Lao Bei had no recollection of it at all. I asked him many times, including when we were drunk last night. I even dragged him to the palace to relax. But brother, Yin did not say a word. His face was blank. This can only mean two things. First, he might have been brainwashed. All his memories of the South Pole Divine Palace were forcefully erased by a powerful external force. That's why he can't remember anything. The second point is that brother Yin might have made a vow, or he might have been cursed by the people of the South Pole Divine Palace. This curse restricts him from mentioning anything about the sect. Otherwise, there's only one outcome for brother Yin, and you all know it. Xiao Yi told the results of his analysis. As soon as he said this, everyone, including Qin Hao, felt a chill run down their spines. No matter what, this method was too cruel. If it was Qin Hao, he would never allow anyone to erase his memories or be forced to curse him. This result was undoubtedly handing his life over to the South Pole Divine Palace. In the end, Yin Lao Bei became the most outstanding emperor in Beijiang. However, as long as the South Pole Divine Palace said the word, he would have to work for it. If it wanted him dead, he would have to die. This is a disgrace to a righteous sect. I despise it. Duan Zhanfei was the first to be angered. If that was the case, it would be better to let his son stay by his side. If the condition to become a disciple of the South Pole Divine Palace was to hand over Duan Ziju's life, Duan Zhanfei would not allow it. It is indeed terrifying to the extreme. Even someone like Emperor Yin doesn't dare to go against the South Pole Divine Palace. Is it a holy land that repels outsiders? Or is it an evil existence? I'm sorry, I misspoke. Chapter 1093. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Go, Southern Region. I have secretly done some research. Here is a document about the successful graduates of the South Pole Divine Palace. Everyone take a look. He pointed to the thick stack of files on the table. The South Pole Divine Palace was mysterious and powerful. It was the best place to train Xiao Han. For the sake of his daughter's safety, He put in a lot of effort. In the process of the research, a large number of elite members of the Luo net were sacrificed. Perhaps this file wasn't complete, but there was only one copy in the entire continent. It was extremely precious. Duan Zhanfei reached out and took it. His resolute eyes swept across it, and his thick brows furrowed. Then he handed it to Gongsun Chongqing. After reading it, Gongsun Chongqing lost his composure. Fear surged in his eyes. Immediately after, Xiao Ming took the file. The more he read, the more abnormal his expression became. He even looked at Qin Hao from time to time, his eyes filled with worry. Is there something on my face that I didn't wash off? Qin Hao touched his face. It was quite smooth. There was nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with your face. The problem is this. Prince Consort, take a look at it yourself. As for whether or not to participate in the South Pole Divine Palace, you must be very cautious. Think twice before you act. Xiaoming's expression was old-fashioned as he handed the file to Qin Hao. Qin Hao couldn't help but be interested. He lowered his head and looked at it carefully. As he flipped through the pages, he became more and more surprised. The file recorded the information of several graduates of the South Pole Divine Palace, starting from Yin Laobei. Among them, because it was too long ago, there was no accurate answer. But just the answer alone was enough to shock Qin Hao. Among the disciples who graduated from the previous batch, Brother Yin is the only survivor. In the batch above him, all the disciples who were selected were wiped out, including the 3 batches, the 4 batches, and the 5 batches. None of them were spared. It wasn't until 3,000 years ago, in the winter of the 5,967th year of the Divine Wilderness Calendar, that the qualified graduates of the South Pole Divine Palace were considered normal. That batch was the sign of Emperor Lia's participation. There were a total of 8 graduates. After graduation, all 8 of them became Emperor Yuan. Divine Wilderness Calendar, winter of 5,233, 12 disciples graduated from the South Pole Divine Palace. All of them are Emperor Yuan. Primordial Spirit Recovery Calendar, winter of year 379, nurtured 29 emperors. Year 183, nurtured 56 emperors, all the way back to the first batch, where a divine-level expert was born. Xiao Yi's expression was very serious and nervous. He was so nervous that his facial muscles were trembling. According to the data, the older the disciple, the more qualified they were and the stronger they were. As for the disciples whose time was closest to the present, the higher the death rate, the more severe the elimination. In fact, several generations of geniuses had all fallen. It was impossible to find out what kind of terrible disaster had befallen the members of those batches in the South Pole Divine Palace, because everyone had died. He was the only survivor in Yin Laobei's batch. However, Yin Laobei's cultivation was far from being comparable to Emperor Li, who had been nurtured by the South Pole Divine Palace during its glory days, let alone the only divine-level expert who had become a legend. Even so, Yin Laobei still managed to become an emperor-stage martial artist from a trash gangster. Brother Yin is a member of the South Pole Divine Palace. No one here is allowed to speak of this matter. If not, no matter how sad it is, don't blame me for being ruthless. Even my son-in-law is no exception. Xiao Yi's warning and majestic gaze swept across everyone in the hall. The 4 emperors of Ming, Cheng, Xian, and Zhu and Duan Zhanfei immediately stood respectfully. Needless to say, Gongsun Changxing was an old confidant who had watched Xiao Yi grow up. He would never reveal Yin Laobei's secret. Understand. Qin Hao took a deep breath and made a heavy promise. At the same time, he felt a burst of fear in his heart. Was he afraid? A little. The South Pole Divine Palace was too strange. All kinds of signs indicated that after Emperor Li, a monstrous change had occurred in the sect, which led to the bizarre deaths of several batches of disciples. Qin Hao was not invincible. It could even be said that even if he recovered to Dinda's majestic appearance, he would not be able to shake the South Pole Divine Palace. Do you still want to go now? Xiaoming asked at this time. Prince Consort, please be careful. Prince Consort, please be careful. Xiao Cheng, Xiao Xian, and Xiao Ju all spoke up, urging Qin Hao not to go. Uncle Duan, what about you? Will you let the crown prince participate in this year's ceremony? Qin Hao looked at Duan Zhanfei. Duan Zhanfei shook his head. Ziju definitely cannot go. It's not that I don't trust his ability, but I'm really afraid of losing him. The main reason is that the Empire is currently in a dire situation. Northern Yin and Northern Qi are eyeing us covetously. As the crown prince, Ziju will be the role model and lead the army. If Prince Consort and Princess go to the South Pole Divine Palace, he will have to shoulder the responsibility of protecting the Empire. My good brother Duan? Xiao, he couldn't help but laugh. He was also very touched. What about you, father-in-law? Will you let little Han participate? Qin Hao asked Xiao Yi again. Don't change the target. Talk about yourself first. Xiao Yi rolled his eyes and pushed the question back to Qin Hao. I still have to go. Qin Hao clenched his fists and encouraged himself. After a short moment of consideration, the South Pole Divine Palace opened once every few hundred years. All the top geniuses of the continent would participate, so he couldn't be absent. If he didn't, he would be a joke to Zhou Wu Dao. How could he talk about competing with Zhan Wu again? More importantly, Qin Hao couldn't give up the chance to obtain the Godhead, even if the chances were less than 1 in 10,000. Prince Consort, you can't. The mortality rate is too high. It's a one-way trip. Xiao Ming and the others were anxious. Good boy. Your courage is outstanding. You are really my good son-in-law. Xiao Yi praised. If the South Pole Divine Palace really scared Qin Hao, then he wasn't worthy of marrying his daughter. Sooner or later, Qin Hao would understand that he couldn't become a god and wasn't worthy of Xiao Han, who had the bloodline of the Emperor God. Of course, Xiao Yi wouldn't reveal this for the time being. Let's try our luck. What if I become the second Uncle Yin? Qin Hao smiled faintly, but his smile wasn't relaxed. But Qin Hao wasn't afraid. The reason why he dared to go meant that he had a certain degree of confidence in surviving. With the power of the Crimson Sunset, the Great Void Cauldron, and the body of a demigod, even if Xiao Yi and everyone here worked together, they might not be able to kill Qin Hao. Even if he met a 9-star Great Emperor, Qin Hao had at least a 30% chance of escaping. Erase his memory? Plant a curse? Sorry, once he found out that something was wrong, Qin Hao wouldn't let the South Pole Divine Palace take advantage of him. Since you've decided, let's leave in 3 days. You can take advantage of this 1 year to familiarize yourself with the environment of the southern region. Get to know some of the older generation experts of the southern region and those who are qualified to compete with you. As for your parents, I'll let them stay in Daliao first. Your father needs to improve his strength. When he misses Western Liang, I'll arrange for Xiao Ming to escort them back home. Xiao Yi waved his hand at Qin Hao and asked him to leave to prepare. Chapter 1094. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios, let's have some fun, okay? Oh. Qin Hao answered and left. He then turned back and said, although I don't know where father-in-law found the demonic power, forgive me for being blunt, but it's best not to use it. The more you use it, the more it will devour your lifespan, and it will speed up your aging. In a worst-case scenario, father-in-law will completely turn into a demon and lose your humanity. What? Xiao Yi was shocked. He opened his eyes wide and stood up with his hands on the table. How do you know I've turned into a demon? Only Duan Zhanfei and a few others knew about this. Even Xiao Han did not know. Qin Hao could see through it with a glance. Cough, cough. Father-in-law, you don't have to be surprised. I was in danger once and had no way out. I found a treasure book of alchemy in a cave. This book was written by an almighty who had unfortunately fallen. It recorded some information about turning into a demon, so I could see the demonic aura in your body just by looking at your expression. But I don't have a way to suppress your demonic aura because it's too strong. Qin Hao shook his head helplessly. Demon and God. Both of them had transcended the limits of the mortal world. Even the heavenly Tao could not do anything to them. Qin Hao, who was reborn after Dendi, could not help either. He could only advise Xiao Yi to use the demonic power as little as possible. Xiao Yi and Duan Zhanfei looked at each other. They were too shocked. Let me ask you, was the treasure book of alchemy left behind by Dendi of the East Continent 600 years ago? Also, where did you learn the Tai Chi energy in your body? And where did Miss Mu Yue come from? At this moment, Xiao Yi spat out all the questions he had suppressed in his heart. Regarding the treasure book of alchemy that Qin Hao mentioned, he had heard it from Xiao Han before. Xiao Yi did not believe it then, but now he had to believe it. That's right. The Encyclopedia of Alchemy is indeed a relic left behind by Dendi, the most powerful man in the East Continent 600 years ago. As for me, I can be considered as half of his disciple. Father-in-law, please remember to use your demonic powers as little as possible. My Tai Chi Supreme Energy was also learned from the Alchemy treasure book. As for Wei Wei, Qin Hao rubbed his nose. He guessed that Xiao Yi and Duan Zhanfei were suspicious of Vivian. After all, Mu Yue's name was too shocking, second only to Denda's name. Even if she had been missing for 600 years, it was inevitable that little Yuan emperor like Xiao Yi would be shocked by her sudden appearance. Wei Wei is a very important friend of mine, but she's not Empress Si Wei of the Penglai Immortal Mountain. We only share the same name, Qin Hao replied vaguely. Xiao Yi let out a long sigh. He almost thought that Vivian was Empress Si Wei from Penglai of the Eastern Sea. But thinking about it carefully, it was completely impossible. Empress Zi Wei had already been killed by the setting sun battle god. Remember, unless your life is in danger, don't use the Tai Chi Supreme Energy in front of others. That will bring disaster to you. When that time comes, even I won't be able to protect you. The Tai Chi Divine Sect has been destroyed for 600 years, and the setting sun battle god strength is already at the peak of the current continent. He's far more powerful than Dendi, Xiao Yi reminded. He waved his hand and let Qin Hao leave. I'll be careful. All right, there's one more thing. Qin Hao stepped forward and used his essence chi to activate his golden finger. He quickly drew a complicated pattern on his left palm. Suddenly, a dazzling light burst out from his palm and filled the entire righteous virtue hall. Qin Hao tore a piece of cloth from his clothes and placed it on the dragon table. In front of Xiao Yi, he slapped his left hand heavily. When he slowly moved his hand away, the complicated pattern on his palm had already been imprinted on the cloth lying quietly on the table. Looking down, the pattern was very complicated and exquisite. The most conspicuous one was the divine furnace in the middle. Vaguely, there was a vast and mighty emperor's aura coming from the divine furnace. Xiao Yi was forced to take 2 steps back by this oppressive emperor's aura. There were also 4 powerful ancient words, primordial Xian song, that surrounded the divine furnace, making the pattern look domineering and arrogant. This is the emperor's emblem. Xiao Yi recognized at a glance. Only Emperor Yuan, who was at the peak of the continent, was worthy of having his own unique emperor's emblem. Even Xiao Yi wasn't qualified to enjoy this treatment. However, the emperor's emblem that Qin Hao copied seemed to be from a long time ago, so Xiao Yi didn't recognize it. Qin Hao smiled gently. Although he didn't explain, his smile had already admitted that the pattern on the cloth was the emperor's emblem. I'm going to participate in the South Pole Divine Palace's omen. I don't know when I'll be back. If one day the Yisheng Di old monster comes to attack, you can throw this item to him, and Great Liao will be safe. Qin Hao explained seriously. It was normal that Xiao Yi didn't recognize the emperor's emblem that belonged to Dendi. In the entire continent, only Qin Hao, Vivian, and Xinq knew about it. Of course, there was also the Holy Emperor, who was about to be incomparably aggrieved. Nephew Qin, are you joking? Although the Emperor's emblem you drew seems to have a great aura, its grade is probably not inferior to the Sunset Battle God's emblem. But how can it scare the Holy Emperor away? Duan Zhanfei shook his head, not confident at all. No one present could recognize who the Emperor's emblem in front of them belonged to. However, Xiao Yi and the others knew better than anyone else about the Holy Emperor's strength. 600 years ago, the Holy Emperor could exchange 10 rounds with Dindi, who was at the peak of the continent. How strong was he now? Just thinking about it made one's hair stand on end. If he could be scared away by an Emperor's emblem, the sun must have risen from the west. The Sunset Battle God's emblem was more likely. We'll know once we try. If you're interested, Father-in-law can order the elites of the Luo network to secretly investigate this Emperor's emblem. Qin Hao was a little angry. He flung his sleeves and stepped out of the hall. Also, Xiao Han has to come with me. I swore that I would never be separated from her in this life. Impossible, she won't go. Xiao Yi's reply came from inside the hall. She is my wife. Qin Hao stopped in his tracks, stood outside the hall, and shouted towards the inside. But she's also my daughter. Xiao, he didn't back down. Xiao, he didn't back down. You fine, just wait and see. Qin Hao went to the Hall of Thought and packed up his things to ensure that the storage in his spatial ring was sufficient. This trip to the southern region was a new challenge. As for Xiao Han, of course, they will follow me, and the husband and wife will follow. Chapter 1095. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. After accompanying his parents in the Hall of Thought for 3 days, Qin Hao had secretly gathered all the items he needed and was ready to set off. This round of plundering had also emptied Xiao Yi's treasury, causing his father-in-law to almost go berserk. Qin Hao wasn't interested in high-level cultivation techniques or divine soldier weapons at all. As for money, Dinda was so poor that he only had money left. He hadn't taken a single cent. What Qin Hao took away were the medicinal herbs that Xiao Yi had stored for half his life. They were of extremely high quality and extremely rare. Their value was immeasurable. In order not to worry Qin Dingtian and Tangrong, Qin Hao had given them an excuse before leaving that he was going out to travel. He would return in a few months or at most half a year. The two elders didn't suspect anything. They had never restricted Qin Hao's freedom, and their son had never worried them. Therefore, they were very relieved. Southern suburbs of the imperial capital, between two hills, Qin Hao's team was standing there. Apart from Yishuian, Xiaogua, and the others who had returned to Western Liang, the old demon, the dog spirit, and the 2 centaur warriors from the medicinal valley had stayed behind. The 2 centaur warriors were practically inseparable from the dog spirit, constantly protecting it and urging it to integrate the power of the inheritance. They turned back to look in the direction of the imperial capital, but the figure they were looking forward to still hadn't appeared. Qin Hao had also stayed there for a long time. Master, don't look anymore. Xiao, he won't let Mistress follow us to participate in the omen. Let's go. The old demon was already impatient. Qin Hao smiled but didn't respond. He turned around and looked at the 2 young men standing beside the dog spirit. The 2 young men were transformed from centaur warriors. Their cultivation had reached the mid-level Yuan Venerate, and they had the ability to transform into human form. They were also the youngest centaur warriors left. How's the matter that I've troubled you two with? Qin Hao asked. Roar. The 2 of them closed their eyes, looking cold and detached. The dog spirit couldn't help but growl at them. Seeing this, one of the young men opened his eyes. This young man, with a slightly yellowish complexion, raised his arm coldly and threw a deformed head at Qin Hao's feet. Qin Hao looked down and nodded with satisfaction. This head had an extraordinary origin. If it appeared in Daoyao's imperial city, it would definitely cause a commotion, because it was the head of Zhou Wuning, the 3rd-place winner of the competition, Zhou Wudao's cousin. Zhou Wudao was frightened by Qin Hao and fled from the battle. On that day, Zhou Wuning did not leave in time. Later, Qin Hao arranged 2 centaur warriors to intercept and kill them on their way back home. Judging from the current state of his head, Zhou Wuning's eyes were wide open. His eye sockets had been torn apart, and his eyeballs were bloodshot. It was not hard to guess that he must have been shocked by the cultivation base of these 2 centaur clan warriors before he died. Useless human, you couldn't even withstand 2 moves from my elder brother before your head was cut off. At this time, the other centaur clan warrior with closed eyes spoke. His eyes slowly opened, revealing coldness and ruthlessness. His face was very dark. The elder brother he spoke of was naturally the young man with a dark yellow complexion who threw the head. Ha! The old demon sneered. He was quite dissatisfied with the attitude of these 2 centaur clan warriors. He even had the impulse to teach them a lesson. No matter how useless Zhou Wudao was, he was still a human. In the eyes of the paleo beasts, not only was he weak, but his identity was also despicable. It was obvious that he looked down on the human race. Obviously, these 2 centaur clan warriors were also hiding something behind their words. In fact, if it weren't for the dog spirit, they wouldn't have allied themselves with Qin Hao, because they felt that Qin Hao was not worthy. Thank you. Qin Hao used his gaze to stop the angry old demon. The paleo beasts had a noble bloodline and were blessed by the gods. It was normal for them to consider themselves superior. Moreover, Huang and Ahe were serving the dog spirit. It was reasonable for them to be dissatisfied with Qin Hao. More importantly, these 2 weren't very old. According to the lifespan of the human race, they were about 28 or 29 years old. They were about the same age as Zhou Wuning. However, Zhou Wuning couldn't even withstand 2 moves. It was indeed very embarrassing. Who gave him the courage to act so arrogantly in the past? By the way, old demon, how much do you know about Emperor Lei? Qin had diverted the old demon's attention so that the old demon wouldn't be impulsive and fight with the 2 centaur clan warriors. Emperor Lei? The old demon was stunned and said awkwardly, I don't know anything about him. The old demon understood what Qin Hao meant. His predecessor, the Blood Emperor, had a lifespan of nearly 3,000 years. It just so happened that that era belonged to Emperor Lei. In Qin Hao's opinion, the old demon should know something about Emperor Lei. But in fact, that was not the case. First of all, Emperor Lei was a peak great emperor, and his forces were in the East Continent. At that time, the old demon had only cultivated to the Emperor realm, and he was Emperor Yuan of Western Liang. Whether it was cultivation or geographical advantage, he was tens of thousands of times inferior to Emperor Lei. This was like comparing Nalan Zhengang of Western Liang to the sunset war god of the East Continent. There was no comparison at all. With the old demon's level, there wasn't even anyone who could flatter him. Moreover, I had just cultivated to the Emperor realm and my lifespan was about to be exhausted, so I sealed myself in the small gourd. You know this. I'm really embarrassed. The old demon transmitted his voice to Qin Hao in embarrassment. It was better not to let the 2 centaur warriors know about the secrets of his previous life and Qin Hao's previous life. These 2 were so arrogant and looked down on the human race. They didn't want to be with the second master. Chapter 1096. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations can't transform into a human. Qin Hao nodded. We must be careful on this trip to the southern region. The unknown was the scariest. Glancing at Zhou Wuning's head, Qin Hao suddenly realized that he shouldn't have let Xianyuan Wuji leave safely. Being selected as a disciple of the South Pole Divine Palace was Qin Hao's ostensible goal. In addition, he needed to take back one of the 9 elements, the universal soil. Only by obtaining the universal soil could he save Lin Feng's life. Lin Feng didn't have much time left. His remnant soul had only survived until now thanks to Qin Hao's tranquil water. If he didn't reconstruct his body, the tranquil water wouldn't be able to protect him. Thinking back to the news that Xianyuan Huang had revealed, the Gravity Emperor had obtained the universal soil and hid it somewhere. The enmity between Xianyuan Wuji and Qin Hao in the Emperor Martial competition would definitely affect his chances of obtaining the universal soil in the future. Leaving him alive would be a disaster. It seems that father-in-law really doesn't want Xiao Han to participate in the competition with me. Looking in the direction of the imperial capital, Qin Hao still didn't see any movement. Shaking his head, he waved his hand and said, "Let's go." Roar! The dog spirit spread its wings and jumped into the air. Its body expanded, and its powerful tail swung back and forth in the air. It was very wild. In the next second, Qin Hao rose vertically and stepped on the dog spirit's back. The old demon and the two centaur warriors that had taken human form rose into the air at the same time. The team was about to set off. Big brother Qin Hao. At this moment, a voice that Qin Hao had been waiting for came from behind him. When Qin Hao turned around, he saw Xiao Han riding the rainbow skylark happily. Western Liang, Luoshui Empire, Cloud City Harbor. To go to the southern region, one had to pass through the Luoshui Empire. Cloud City Harbor was located in the southwest corner of Luoshui. It was the largest harbor closest to the southern region. Similarly, its navy was the Luoshui Empire's most famous force. On land, Luoshui might not be able to compete with the three empires of the northern frontier. However, in terms of shipbuilding technology, Daliao and Northern Yan would never catch up with the Luoshui Empire, even if they had a few more decades. Luoshui wasn't called that for nothing. Nearly 80% of the empire's surface area was made up of rivers and lakes, and the navy was incomparably tyrannical. Before Qin Hao and Xiao Han came to Yunqing Harbor, they went back to the imperial city of Luoshui and met Yilan Yuan. Yilan Yuan expressed that he did not want Yishui Han to go to the southern mountain range too early. Or rather, he had no intention of letting his son participate in the omen at all, because the signs were too dangerous. However, Yilan Yuan ordered the navy of Yunqing Harbor to give up the largest and sturdiest warship to help Qin Hao cross the sea. At this time, the most powerful warship was already sailing above the South China Sea. It was 260 meters long and 80 meters high. From the deck to the top, there were 18 layers stacked on top of each other, which was very spectacular. From afar, it looked more like a small island appearing on the sea level of the South China Sea. However, because it was a warship, it paid more attention to practicality. Therefore, the internal facilities were not very luxurious. Even so, Ah-He and Huang, the two centaur warriors, were amazed. The two of them were like children who had never seen the world, drilling around inside the warship, silently counting how many rooms there were in the ship. At this time, on the highest peak of the warship, in a pavilion with a lookout function, Qin Hao sat on the ground, his body covered with a faint red flame. In front of him, the remaining Ling Tian jade, which was less than half the size of a fist, was being instilled with primordial qi and was floating bit by bit. Since stepping into the South China Sea, Qin had been studying the Ling Tian jade. The more he studied it, the more he found it magical. Roar! The dog spirit's low growl was heard, telling Qin Hao that it was time to rest. Qin Hao wiped the sweat on his forehead, smiled slightly, put away the Ling Tian jade, and stroked the dog spirit's head with his palm. "How much power of inheritance have you absorbed?" Qin Hao asked. The dog spirit had not been idle along the way. It stayed in the cabin and worked hard to integrate the Beast Emperor's inheritance. According to the strength of its current aura, it had already reached the level of a rank 4 Beast Venerable, although it was still a little lower than the two Centaur warriors. However, it was enough to transform into a human form. But the strange thing was that the dog spirit was still unable to transform into a human. Qin Hao guessed that this might be related to the dog spirit's bloodline. Roar! The dog spirit barked impatiently, shook its fur, and stood up. It drooped its head, looking depressed, as if saying, "I'm too stupid. Why can't I transform into a human like Huang and Ah-He?" I've already absorbed 10% of the power of the Beast Emperor's inheritance. 10%? Qin Hao frowned slightly. 10% of the Beast Emperor's power only allowed the dog spirit to become a rank 4 beast venerable. It shouldn't be so weak. As he spoke, Qin Hao pressed his palm on the dog spirit's back and sent a stream of vitality into its body to investigate. But this stream of vitality immediately disappeared without a trace in the dog spirit's body. As soon as it entered, it was directly annihilated by another powerful force. You have the old Beast Emperor's shackles on you. With the shackles protecting you, I can't find out the real reason. Didn't you ask the old Beast Emperor when we came out of the Medicine Valley? Qin Hao moved his palm away. This time, there was nothing he could do. Woo-woo. When the old Beast Emperor was mentioned, the dog spirit let out a heavy whimper. What? The old Beast Emperor is already dead. Qin Hao was shocked. However, after calculating the time, the old Beast Emperor's lifespan had indeed reached its end. The shackles on the dog spirit's body were obviously forcefully sealed by the old Beast Emperor with the last of his strength at the moment of his death. But this way, there was no way to know why Brother Dog couldn't transform into a human like the other beast venerables. Boom! Suddenly, the battleship seemed to have crashed into a mountain, and there was a violent tremor. The hull of the battleship started to tilt, causing large piles of items to fall and shatter. Big Brother Qin Hao, we seem to have crashed into something. Xiao Han rushed in anxiously with care. Let's go out and take a look. Putting aside the problem of the dog spirit's inability to transform into a human for the time being, Qin Hao led everyone out quickly. Chapter 1097. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Hold it up. Wave after wave of huge waves crashed against the hull of the ship, causing the tilting ship to become even more precarious. Ah Huang and Ah He stood on the deck as if nothing had happened, pointing at the old monster who had sunk into the water. They were mumbling to themselves and had relaxed smiles on their faces. They had no intention of helping at all. What's going on? Qin Hao pressed against the edge of the ship and shouted, Master, we've encountered a water beast. It's attacking the ship. The old demon stopped attacking and replied nervously. They had only been at sea for a few days and were still a long way from the southern region. The southern sea was vast, and under the influence of the sea, the pressure in the air was extremely high. The airflow was also very unstable, and the gravity was a few times higher than on land. It was not suitable for martial artists to fly, let alone teleport. If they teleported, they would not even be able to find a foothold. If the ship was sunk by the water beast, the consequences would be dire. Get out of the way. Qin Hao shouted and flew down. He floated above the water and took out the great void sword. A sharp sword aura was activated and pierced through the bottom of the ship. Chi! The sword aura entered the sea and did not react at all. The resistance at the bottom of the sea is very strong. The strength of the vital energy underwater is not even 30% of its original strength. Damn it! The old monster floated up. His entire body was soaked, and sweat flowed down his hair as he angrily explained. At this moment, the ship was tilting to the point where it was about to flip over. Kay held the edge of the ship tightly with both hands. She looked at the deep sea in panic. The rainbow skylark was a flying bird and could not swim. Dear, what should I do? Flame dragon spinning sky slash. Qin Hao did not hesitate and used his strongest move. The great void sword disappeared and a red fireball gathered in his palm. The soul of a dragon danced in it. Then, he threw the fireball at the bottom of the ship. Boom! The fireball split the water and sank below the ship, creating a huge splash. It was a spectacular sight. After the explosion, the water current surged violently, and a lot of bubbles popped up. The temperature of the sea was visible to the naked eye. This attack did not have any effect. Not only that, it almost flipped the ship over. Mr. Lee, what are you doing? Let me tell you, I don't know how to swim. Kay was scared out of her wits. Her hands were trembling, and her limbs felt weak. She could no longer hold on to the edge of the boat. If not for Xiao Han's quick reflexes, she would have definitely fallen into the water. Ha ha! The strength of humans is indeed insignificant. They can't be compared to us. Huang wasn't afraid at all. He started to mock Qin Hao. How was he fit to be the next beast the Arca's master? He was overestimating himself. That's right. This young kid and that old kid are both idiots. Before the Yuan Qi bombardment could even hit the aquatic beast, its strength would be reduced by more than half due to the pressure under the water. The only way to do so was to dive into the sea and engage in close combat with the aquatic beast. However, even if they dive into the sea, they won't be able to defeat the giant deep-sea beasts. Ahei said, gloating. They believed that only by transforming into their true forms would they be able to compete with the giant beasts under the sea. Of course, they wouldn't take the initiative to attack, unless Qin Hao begged them. If I knew this would happen, I would have brought Xue Han along. Qin Hao frowned. He ignored the taunts of the two centaur warriors. Instead, he suddenly thought of Yi Xuehan. Yi Xuehan had the most perfect water god body in the world. The Southern Sea was Yi Xuehan's world. Here, not only would his strength not be weakened, but it would also provide Yi Xuehan with endless water power. If Xuehan was here, she could easily force out the giant beasts that were stuck under the ship. Qin Hao wasn't the same. No matter how ferocious the Red Lotus fire was, once it came into contact with the deep sea, his body would be severely restricted. This warship still has the ability to fly. Old Demon, open the wings of the ship. We will let the warship take flight and drag the monster under the sea into the air. Qin Hao gritted his teeth and said, I'm afraid it won't work. The warship's weight won't be able to support the giant beast's pull. The giant beasts have immense strength underwater. If we force it to take off, I'm afraid the warship will be torn to pieces. Old Demon had already thought of this idea. Then let me do it. Qin Hao held his palms flat, and a vast amount of Yuan Qi spread out from his body. The crimson-red Yuan Qi completely enveloped the warship that was more than 200 meters long. Then, Qin Hao let out a deep roar. His arms seemed to be resisting the heavy pressure, and he lifted them above his head bit by bit. Along with this, half of his face was covered with a layer of dense dragon scales. What? Do you think you can lift the ship and the water monster all by yourself? Huang and Ahei were a little surprised by Qin Hao's bold move. Qin Hao seemed to have seen through their thoughts. He grinned at them, and his face tightened as he roared again, Rise! Boom! The warship shook, and water splashed everywhere. The part that sank into the sea began to rise rapidly. 1 meter, 2 meters, 5 meters, 10 meters. It kept rising. Perhaps Qin Hao really couldn't use his original strength underwater. But on the water, Qin Hao dared to say that his physical strength was so strong that even 2 centaur warriors couldn't withstand it. It was not difficult to lift the entire warship. Haha, Mr. Li, you are so powerful. When the warship rose bit by bit until it was out of the control of the sea, Kei immediately felt a sense of security and clapped her hands in praise. At this time, the warship had risen 50 meters and the monster below was exposed. Looking at it, it was a 100-meter-long, ugly meatball that was stuck to the bottom of the ship. As the warship rose higher and higher, the meatball felt a strong sense of danger, and its 8 tentacles sucked tighter. Qin Hao and Xiao Han looked over and found that there was indeed a group of figures struggling in the sea, calling out, Help! Help! Nonstop! Chapter 1100. Translator. Nioibo, Studio Who's the Master? Furthermore, in order to elevate Zhang Jing's status, The coffin-faced young man had even belittled Qin Hao's mediocre strength by adding fuel to the fire. In any case, at the end of the story, Qin Hao's cultivation had become a level 3 Yuan monarch. He was even worse than Coffin Face. When Zhang Jingze heard this, he couldn't help but feel a sense of superiority rise infinitely, and his attitude became much more arrogant. But what makes me curious is, how did Qin Hao manage to survive from the hands of those two terrifying people in the same year and month? Coffin Face was extremely rampant right now, and could be said to be completely unbridled. Impudent. How can you speak so bluntly to your benefactor? Zhang Jingze pretended to reprimand the coffin-faced youth, and even slapped him without holding back, breaking 2 of the coffin-faced youth's teeth. Qin Hao couldn't help but admire Zhang Jingze's acting skills. Just now, he couldn't even stand steadily. Now, with a wave of his hand, even his lackey's teeth were knocked out. Although he could tell that Zhang Jingze was not a good person, Qin Hao pretended to be ashamed. My skills are not as good as his. As a loser, I've made Brother Zhang laugh. Creak. Xiao Han clenched his fists tightly, and his eyes were filled with a strong, killing intent. Qin Hao secretly tightened his grip on Xiao Han's hand. When he felt the warmth of his palm, the murderous aura between Xiao Han's brows immediately disappeared. Brother Qin, don't look down on yourself so much. Victory and defeat are commonplace in war. You might as well tell me where those 2 impudent fellows live. I, Zhang Jingze, will stand up for you and let them die without an intact corpse. Zhang Jingze roared in a very magnanimous manner. Moreover, he had a regretful look on his face, as if he had participated in the imperial martial competition, he would most likely have gotten first place. Even if he didn't get first place, he could at least tie with the top 10 geniuses of Imperial Martial University. Second brother, let's go down and eat something first. We still have a long way to go. Your health is more important. Zhang Jingchen urged from the side. Zhang Jingchen knew very well what kind of person his second brother was. He was also afraid that the other party would say too much and make Qin Hao feel disgusted. On the other hand, he wanted to prevent Qin Hao from getting close to Zhang Jingze, fearing that Qin Hao would be hurt. I'm indeed quite hungry. Since that's the case, I'll chat with Brother Qin after I'm full. Ha ha ha. Zhang Jingze swaggered away with his hands behind his back. As he turned around, he glared fiercely at Xiao Han and Kei. Unfortunately, their ship was sunk by a sea monster. After being in the sea for so long, there were only men and fish around them. If I use the Ling Tian Jade to absorb the shackles of the old Beast Emperor, will Brother Dog transform into a human? Qin Hao's eyes suddenly lit up. This was definitely a good idea. But immediately he shook his head. It was too dangerous. Who the hell knew why the old Beast Emperor had placed a seal on the dog spirit? If the shackles were removed, the dog spirit would still not be able to transform into a human. Instead, the power of the inheritance would be lost. After thinking about it, Qin Hao felt that it was better to let nature take its course. Perhaps he would be able to find out the real reason when his cultivation level improved and he had the ability to break through the bestiarch seal. What are you doing? We'll let you in. Get out. 2 little beauties, let me give you a piece of advice. Don't struggle. Even if you shout until your throat is hoarse, no one will come to save you, especially not in front of me. Obey me obediently, and you can avoid physical pain. If you resist, it will only stimulate my emotions and make me even more excited. Suddenly, there was movement downstairs. There was K's reprimanding voice and Zhang Jingze's vulgar laughter. This kid can't hide his foxtail anymore. Qin Hao snorted coldly and got up to go downstairs. Woof woof. The dog spirit's mouth curled up, revealing his fangs. He stopped fusing with the power of inheritance and immediately followed. Downstairs, in the cabin hall, Xiao Han and Kei were forced from the boudoir by Zhang Jingze to the spacious hall. At this moment, the old demon's face was gloomy. In front of him was the yellow-haired old man. Huang and Ah were surrounded by a large group of Zhang Jing's subordinates. Their swords and sabers were already placed on Huang and Ah necks, making them unable to move. Zhang Jingze rubbed his hands and licked his lips. With a vulgar look on his face, he closed in on Xiao Han and Ke, step by step until the two girls retreated to the corner of the hall. In fact, Ke wanted to kill Zhang Jingze and everyone else with one slap. However, Xiao Han secretly stopped her. Therefore, Ke was anxious. She could not understand why her sister did not allow her to do it. "We saved you out of kindness. Is this how you repay us?" Xiao Han asked coldly. "That's right. This is how I repay you. I'll use my young and vigorous body to communicate with you two beauties. This is the best way to repay you in the world. Let's fuse together." Zhang Jing's mouth was full of obscenities. He stretched out his hands and grabbed Xiao Han without restraint. "Stop!" A shout was heard. Qin Hao had arrived. At this moment, Xiao Han's face revealed an imperceptible smile. "Sister, why are you smiling like an idiot? Why don't you let me kill this shameless bastard?" Ke transmitted her voice angrily. "Stay here quietly and just watch." Xiao Han took Ke's hand. Her smile became even sweeter.